المحور اللي احنا مستهدفينه او النقطه اللي احنا مستهدفينه، انه الحوار ما يطلع من المحور اللي احنا مستهدفينه، واي زول بيستخدم اي اسلوب ما بيتماشى مع الموضوع اللي احنا جايين نناقشه. نحن كالناس المسؤولين من الحوار هننزله، يعني نحن ما جايين نصيح على زول، ولا ما جايين نخلق فتن، ولا ما جايين كمجموعه معين، ولكن نحن جايين نحلل ودايرين نضع مصلحه الوطن الاولويه. الكتاب ما هيتناقش بشكل عاطفي، لكن هيتناقش بشكل اللي بيصب فيه مصلحه بتاع بلد الاولويه، بعيدا عن الصراع السياسي. ممكن تحليلات تختلف طبعا وفقا للتوجهات الحركات او بعض من المعارضات الموجوده. فاتمنى انه كلنا نناقش يفيد الوطن ويفيدنا كلنا، ونضع السلبيات ممكن يعني يجي من خلال نقاشنا او من خلال قراءة الخاطئ للكتاب، نضعه في شكل يعني نبينه من النقاش ونضع مصلحة الوطن في الأولوية يعني. فأنا هدي فرصة للأستاذ دينجي إنه يستلم للناس المستمعين، ومنه أساسيا برضه يستلم للناس المستمعين، ومن ثم نرجع المنصة للأستاذ دينجي ويبدأ يعني. أستاذ دينجي مرحبا بك.
شكرا لك أستاذ رمضان، وبحييك وبحيي الأستاذ إيان ماثيو وكل المودريتورز اللي معاه، الأخت أوين والأخت دبلومات وكل الحاضرين في الروم. سعداء نكون معكم الليلة، ويكون لنا تعليقات على البحث اللي كتبته كارول بيرجر، وده ما جديد، سبق وأن تم مناقشتي في عدد من الغرف هنا في الكلاب هاوس، وكان له ردود أفعال كثيرة جدا. وده نفس الموضوع القديم المتجدد اللي احنا جايين نناقشه الليلة. فده اللي بقدر بقوله، لكن في كلامي بعدين أنا هتكلم باللغة الإنجليزية أكثر. يعني لو في حتات أنا شايف إنه محتاج له وأقوله بالعربي أنا بقوله، but mainly I will be speaking in English. Thank you.
شكرا كثير أستاذ دينجي، شكرا. ما في مشكلة، ما في مشكلة. النقاط اللي أنت ممكن هتضيفهم باللغة الإنجليزية وأستاذيا برضه ممكن أنتوا تبادلوا الأدوار مع بعض، يعني ما في مشكلة. أستاذيا مرحبا بك.
أهلا وسهلا في هذه الأمسية بالنسبة لي، وفي هذه الصباحية بالنسبة للباقي الناس في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، وفي هذه النهارية بالنسبة لباقي الناس اللي قاعدين في الدول الثانية اللي أنا ما بعرفها ولكن تبدو لهم أنها نهارية. وأحييكم جميعا، وأحيي أستاذة أوين على هذه الدعوة الكريمة، وأحيي دبلومات وأستاذ رمضان على هذه الدعوة. And indeed, I'll also be speaking in English, but when need be, I'll definitely try to get translation into Arabic. No worries. أنا أتمنى إن النقاش يكون علمي ومنهجي، ما سياسي. أنا قاعد هنا الليلة ما قاعد كزول سياسي، أنا قاعد هنا كزول عنده أفكاره واتجاهاته الفكرية اللي ممكن تساعده في تحليل الكتاب. شكرا جزيلا.
جميل، شكرا كثير أستاذ إيان ماثيو. وده النقطة المهمة جدا، الجوهر اللي احنا حننطلق فيه كلنا في الحوار، إنه الحوار ما حيكون حوار بصمت زي ما بيقولوا، يعني ما حيكون جدل، لكن حيكون تحليل واقعي، ونشوف الواقع الحقيقي من الكتاب شنو، ونضع مصلحة الوطن زي ما أنا قلت في الأولوية. فنحن ما عاملين الروم عشان نحن جايين نستعرض مع زول يعني، أو ما عاملين روم كروم مضاد زي ما في ناس كثير بعملوا رومات في كلاب هاوس، رومات بيكون رومات مضادة. فنحن جايين نناقش نقاش علمي زي ما أستاذ يين يتكلم وأضاف عليه دينجي. فنتمنى إنه يكون حوار حقيقي عبره نضع مصلحه الوطن في الاولويه. شكرا كثير استاذ زياد. استاذ زين المنصه حيرجع لك وممكن تبدا. تفضل.
Okay. The moderators, ladies and gentlemen in the room, I need not pause to express how elated I am to be here once again and to share with you my views on the working paper, ETHNOCIDE as a tool of state building, South Sudan, and the never-ending war by Carol Berger on the current affairs in our country. I would like to make my commentary and my analysis based on how I look at the paper. This is something I would like to say from the very beginning, and whatever I will be saying here reflect my personal views on the paper in connection with the security of our country and the well-being of our people. So I would like to acknowledge and appreciate the presence of those of you who are in the room now, and those others who would join us in the next few minutes, and those who would join the recorded room, which would remain hovering on the corridors of Clubhouse always. I sincerely appreciate your meaningful presence in order to follow the issues that would be discussed here in this morning, this afternoon, and this evening, according to our different time zones. Your presence here reflects your great concern about your country and its subsequent unfolding developments. I would like also to appreciate the moderators of this room for their initiative, especially Sister Awien, in bringing us together to discuss the content of ETHNOCIDE as a tool of state building. It is an opportunity for me as a speaker, on one hand, to speak out my mind on the subject matter, and you as audience, and not only as audience, but also discussant on the other hand, to speak out your minds on the same subject matter. My commentary and analysis would cover the following point in the paper. One would be introduction, which I believe I have already started. The second point would be the mistakes of the Dinka elites. And the third one will be the themes of the paper. And then I will come to the details and finally the conclusion. So I'm already in point number one, which is introduction. And I feel that I still have some more thing to say before I go deeply into the topic. The researcher or the author of ETHNOCIDE as a tool of state building, according to the footnote on page 1 of her research paper, has obtained a doctorate degree in anthropology from the University of Oxford, and she is a Commonwealth scholar. And you are all aware that Commonwealth is a political term used to refer to a group of independent countries that were formerly colonies of Great Britain, a body that was formed when the British Empire in those countries around the world ended based on agreements which made those countries political puppets that served the interests of Britain. In other words, this is a continuation of colonialism in a different form. You might rightly call it new colonialism. This means that the author of this research can be critically seen as an agent reporting to the Commonwealth imperialists or capitalists and the countries which are referred to as superpowers today. And I want you to remember that capitalism is a political and economic zeitgeist of our time, especially in the 21st century. She had lived in the United Sudan since 1980s, according to what she mentioned in the report, for 8 years, and in also independent South Sudan. She's a Canadian by nationality, and she lived and worked in South Sudan under different names, such as researcher, independent analyst, and other names since 2005 throughout 2006 until 2019, I guess, or after 2020. Because when you read the report, I mean the research, you could be able to predict the time in which the report was written. So she lived in South Sudan as an independent researcher since 2005 and 6, completing her doctoral fieldwork, and later working as a researcher and analyst for the United Nations mission in South Sudan, which she accused in her paper of being biased to the regime, and we shall come later to this issue. She worked at Rumbek Senior Secondary School as a volunteer teacher, and not really as a teacher, in my opinion, as she allegedly claimed, but to study the people as an agent of superpowers. And that is where she began her doctoral fieldwork. She encouraged students to write short stories, and they wrote 2 volumes of short stories in response to her encouragement. One of those volumes is titled The Rumbek Review, Part 1, The Legend of Shoiguak and Other Stories, published by Fountain Publishers in Kampala 2010. And the other one is The Rumbek Review, Part 2, Jing on the Moon, published by the Anglo-Egyptian Bookshop in Cairo, 2017. She had been living in Cairo, Egypt, but she is now said to be in Canada or in the United States of America. I met her in Cairo in 2019, on Wednesday, September 4th, 2019 to be exact. I was walking in a corridor in my workplace at an NGO providing services to the refugee community in Cairo when we bumped into each other. As someone who has been in South Sudan for a long time and became very much acquainted with physical features of South Sudanese, she knew that I was a South Sudanese. And when she saw me right away, she then asked me, "Are you from South Sudan?" This was, of course, after we said hi to each other. And she was, of course, asking the obvious to only get a confirmation from me. "Yes, I am," I answered. Her next questions, as I remember, was, "Are you a Dinka?" "Yes, I am," I answered, but suspiciously. She then confidently presented herself to me as an independent researcher and analyst in South Sudan. The reason for being suspicious was, why should a tribe define South Sudan? In addition to my awareness of how tribal factors have contributed to the destruction of our country in the December 2013 civil war, and my thoughts about nation building and nationhood in post-independence South Sudan. Above all, my conscience was telling me, why was a foreigner concerned about which tribe do I belong to in South Sudan? What was the motive behind such a concern? She then gave me a book titled Jane on the Moon, a collection of short stories. In school, the short stories were amazing. And as someone who likes literature and an English language instructor, I enjoyed reading those short stories very much. I could sense our local imaginations and creativity in them as I was reading the book. And I could sense the typical way of a Dinka storytelling style and mannerisms in those short stories. So they were indeed a reflection of the Dinka society, its culture and mythology, history and music. Her previous questions were automatically answered when I later on opened the book she gave me to read. In the book, I discovered that she twisted some of those stories by politicizing them and connecting them to her political agenda, which I shall talk about shortly. And she gave me her telephone number and email address. I wrote her name, her email, and phone number on the first page of the book she gave me. I remember that she dictated me her name, and fortunately, I didn't keep in touch with her until until now. So, as an anthropologist and analyst, I understood why she collected those short stories from the Dinka society. She did that because she was studying the Jiang or the Dinka as a society in order to better understand their culture, their history, mythology, and what they think about themselves through those short stories, and connect that thinking to the current political turmoil in the country. This politicization of fictional works, in my opinion, is a malevolent, deliberate action which represented the agenda of the author and those is sponsoring her and actually is sponsoring her schemes. In April last year, I saw her name in a book by Professor Peter Duoknyaba. The book is titled South Sudan, Elites, Ethnicity, Endless Wars, and the Stunted State. Obviously, she read the manuscript and forwarded it. She agrees with Professor Duoknyaba's analysis on a number of issues he discusses in his book. And I believe that she benefited a lot from the analytical content of Dr. Peter Duoknyaba in regard to ethnicity and its connection with politics in South Sudan. She had seemingly coined the title of her working paper from the very title Dr. Adwok Nyaba used for his book. And you can see how the two titles are close to one another. Adwok's book is titled South Sudan, Elite, Ethnicity, Endless Wars, and the Stunted State. And her research title is Ethnocide as a Tool of State Building, South Sudan and the Never-Ending War. So you can see how ethnicity is corresponding in the two titles, and the issue of endless war or the never-ending war. However, the two works are different. So Professor Adwok Nyaba, as a scholar and a nationalist, is talking about the government, is talking about elites, is talking about ethnicity and endless wars of the SPLM that resulted into what he called the stunted state in South Sudan. While Carol Berger is talking about the Dinka elites, whom she said are using ethnocide as a tool of state building. To presumably control South Sudan and make it a home of the Dinka and the never-ending war as a result of this. It was from that time that I first understood Carol Berger's ulterior motives and intentions toward South Sudan through that collection of short stories from what she wrote in the introduction of that book, after she decided to put Jane on the Moon, one of short stories written by Dinkur Madin, a title for the whole collection. And this is what she wrote in the introduction, and I quote. The title of this book, Jane on the Moon, is taken from a story written by a young man from Rumbek, South Sudan. The word Jane in Dinka language means people. At a time of rising ethnic nationalism, many now self-identify as Jane rather than the colonial era name of Dinka. In the story, the man on the moon is revealed to be Jane. It was a late decision to open the book with this story and to name the collection with its title, but it seemed appropriate given the current crisis throughout South Sudan, revolving as it does over claims of ownership, not of the moon, but the land now known as South Sudan, unquote. She also went on to say, the rising level of violence within the Dinka, between the many sections and clans that make up what I would call a Dinka or Jem confederation, should have served as a warning. And here she means warning to other South Sudanese or other ethnic groups and the international community as well. It was only, I'm now going on to read the quote. It was only a matter of time before the heated militarization within the Dinka of Lake State would evolve into something much bigger, much more frightening, something that moved beyond Dinka territory and targeted other peoples, including communities of Nuer to the north and east, Fertit, Luo, and Balanda to the west, the Honey gathering people of the Jurbel to the south, and further south into the Equatorias, where the Madi, Kakwa, Azande, Kuku, and other non-Nilotic peoples live, unquote. I'm quoting this from the introduction of a book called Jane on the Moon, which is a collection of short stories edited by Carol Berger herself. And then she wrote this word in the introduction. So the political agenda of Carol Berger can be seen here. It is obvious that she is talking about the internal tensions of the Dinka, depicting the Dinka or the Jain society as a violent society that is dangerous to itself and as a society which constitutes a looming threat to other South Sudanese. In fact, she depicted the Jain society as the main problem in South Sudan. She made a wrong assumption between the fictional man said to be on the moon in the short story and who is said to be Jain and the conflict in South Sudan. She portrayed the moon as South Sudan dominated by Jain. When Jain, according to the short story, is a spiritual leader who was overseeing the spiritual well-being of his people, praying and pleading to gods of the land for blessings, rain, rewarding harvest, health, and life for his people, and who was taken up to the moon by a sudden wind, which blew while he was praying and lifting a curse inflicted on his people by gods of the land as a punishment for a reckless action by a young man who buried a giraffe's tail in earth, provoking the wrath of all gods. The story was about a mythical calamity caused by an abomination and the role of a spiritual leader named Jain in saving the life of his people. It has nothing to do with politics. This is the story of a man called Jain, who is still widely believed today in the Dinka land that he is the moon, or that he is on the moon to protect his people from drought, diseases, and adversaries. But sadly, the story was politically interpreted. And this is by someone who is supposed to be a scholar, anthropologist, and indeed a scientist. She is in fact a Commonwealth scholar, not anthropologist, who has been studying to add more knowledge and scientific content to anthropology as a science that studies human races. With this introduction and background, I come to Clubhouse, ladies and gentlemen in the room, to this room, to discuss the main themes of the paper and present to you their ultimate conclusions and my personal stance to what came up in the entire paper. But before I do this, I want to talk a little bit about the repeated mistakes committed by the Dinka elites and concern, or the concern and fears expressed by South Sudanese over time toward these mistakes. I hope I am heard.
Yes, we can hear you.
So this is my second point. I call these mistakes of Dinka elites, but you ought to notice here that these mistakes are no longer seen as mistakes committed by the Dinka elites in the government of Southern Sudan. In fact, they have become mistakes of the Dinka as a tribe, not only in the way they are presented, but also in the way they are perceived and construed. The Dinka elites in our history have committed repeated fatal mistakes, and other South Sudanese have repeatedly expressed concern, fears, and resentment toward those repeated mistakes. Historically, some of the Dinka figures in the 1972 regional government, as you all know, which was led by lawyer and magistrate Abel Alier, contributed to the growth of suspicion, doubts, fears, and resentment among other South Sudanese toward Jain over time. Now you would all recall that there was a controversial statement made in the regional parliament during the regional government that we are born to rule by a Dinka elite during the leadership of Abel Alier in 1970s, meaning that the Dinka people are born to rule, not to be ruled by their fellow South Sudanese. This is something documented in books of history written by our own historians. A well-known writer, researcher, historian, and a scholar who once served as a head of our diplomatic mission to South African region and Turkey, Dr. John Gayor, has attributed this statement, the born to be ruled statement, to Dr. Justin Yaj Arop, and you all know Justin Yaj Arop, a Jing from Twitch section in Northern Gobial, who served as Minister of Health in the regional government after the signing of the 1972 Addis Ababa Agreement. So these mistakes brought to the surface what was known as Kokoro in our political history. So the mistakes committed by the Dinka elites are not new, and talking about them critically is not a new thing to me at all. I consider myself to be a reader who had read newspapers more than any other time in my life during the CPA interim period in Khartoum, about the general situation in the Sudan as a whole and Southern Sudan as a region. And I vividly remember that two South Sudanese intellectuals were critical critiques of the government of Southern Sudan. These are Professor David Dishan and Professor Wani Tombe Lako Lokitere. Of course, you are all aware that Wani Tombe is no more. They had frequently and lengthily talked about the Dinka political domination in the post-CPA period, as others were talking about it in post-Addis Ababa peace deal period in the 1970s and 1980s. They were intensively writing in the Sudan Vision English newspaper in Khartoum in 2005. Later on, Dr. Wani Tombe founded his own newspaper called The Advocate in 2007 and continued to talk about the Dinka domination and also land issues, especially in Juba, in places like Nyakama, now called Dr. John Garang Memorial Ground. It was called Nyakama because it was believed to have been Nyakamu. I think you all remember the story. And Jubanabari, which is now called Thongping by many people, including the indigenous one. And this is incorrect, of course, and other places in Juba. So, Professor Deshan, as you all know, is now an old man and he's growing older. Dr. Wani Tombe was found dead in his Addis Ababa hotel room in June 2015, and the cause of his death remained mysterious to the day. However, he is widely believed to have been targeted and cold-bloodedly killed. To save time and make the long story short, the mistakes committed by Jain elites or by the Dinka elite could be summarized as follows. One, political dominance over state structures, and this can be seen in the distributions of national portfolios, state institutions, such as civil service, diplomatic mission, security organ, be it the National Security Service, with its two branches, the internal and external bureaus, or the National Army, or military intelligence, or the National Police Service, or the Military Police Criminal Investigation Department, CID, Fire Brigade, Wildlife Forces, Prison Guards, name them. This political domination by Jane is not justified, in my opinion, whatsoever. Some thinkers have tried to justify it on false hypothesis that the Dinka is the largest ethnic group, or they fought more than others during the War of Liberation. But this doesn't make sense at all. Where are the values of justice and equality we have collectively fought for? Where are those universal ideals we have frequently claimed to be fighting for during the protracted wars of liberation as South Sudanese? These are the national values and standards which should guide the country, not the size of an ethnic group, be it Dinka or Nuer or Sholo or Azande or Bari tribes, or who fought and who didn't fight. We have all equally fought for this country, and the liberation struggle is our common national heritage. And our history didn't start in 1983, and therefore attributing the legacy and heritage of the national liberation struggle to a single social group is utterly not acceptable and must be punishable by law, in my opinion. This is one. Number two is manipulation of the liberation struggle. This is a clear denial of participation and contribution of others in the liberation struggle. It is indeed a political disenfranchisement to other core participants who enormously contributed toward the national liberation struggle of South Sudan. And so history of a nation is always attributed to the nation as a collective effort, not to a tribe or a single ethnic group. The concept of tribe and state are two separate antitheses, which can never meet, in my opinion. The first is exclusive and the latter is inclusive, and therefore they cannot meet. Number three is false superiority. Feeling superior among the Dinka elites and looking at other South Sudanese as inferior by telling them that we liberated you or we are your masters is something that must be strongly condemned and made punishable by law. This is a complete ignorance and a vain aggrandizement at expenses of others. Number four, allowing acts of land grabbing to persist, allowing some settlers from the Jiang land to settle in lands of other communities, damaging their farms and crops, allowing them to give new name to places which have names already, and thereby causing fears of an intended demographic change now and in the long run is irreconcilable with law. Five, recruitment of militias which are used to cause terror among civilians and cause displacement is also irreconcilable with law. Six, mismanagement of natural resources and corruption. This corruption has three dimensions. It is administrative, and this is manifested in employment on the basis of blood relation or what we call nepotism. It is financial because there is embezzlement of public funds in national institutions, and it is moral because women are employed in national institutions in exchange for other desires in states of their qualifications. This is a complete administrative, financial, and moral decay which we must be ashamed of. I must, however, say here that all tribes are involved in this three-dimension corruption. It is not Jing or Dinka alone. Yet Jing has the upper hand in it. And as you all recall, the Holy Bible says, all have sinned and fell short of the glory of God. And I would add, they have also fell short of the glory of South Sudan as well. Number 7, and the last of these mistakes, denying the mistakes committed by Jing elites, by Jing sons and daughters, especially here on Clubhouse. This is very sad. And sadly, it is our generation that is now responsible for denial of these mistakes, especially here in Clubhouse. So these mistakes are real, in my opinion. They even rise to the level of crimes. They cannot be denied or refuted. And we are all witnesses to their perpetration. And we all know the perpetrators. They are also dangerous because their results are division, rebellion, hatred, killing, and finally the possible disintegration of the country. This, of course, is the worst scenario of all these mistakes. The solution to all these ills is that the state must apply principles of citizenship as the basis of rights and duties, justice, equality, and providing equal opportunities for all South Sudanese without distinction on the basis of ethnic background, gender, creed, or political beliefs or opinion, as it is the case now. Plots of lands which have been grabbed or illegally acquired must be restored to their rightful owners. The citizens who have settled in lands which belong to other communities must be repatriated back to their original and traditional lands with their herds of cattle. Ironically, these solutions, of course, cannot be practical under the current government. This can only be done in post-revolution era or post-change era. By pointing out the mistakes of Jing elites or the Dinka elites, I am agreeing with those who criticize the government of the Republic of South Sudan, the Jing elites, and urging the opposition at the same time to be responsible. I'm urging the opposition to be responsible by avoiding the mistakes of generalization, because generalization makes the government of South Sudan, the generalization which is now going on, has made the government of the Republic of South Sudan, the Jing elites, and Jing as a nationality, as three inseparable things. The generalizations of talking about the government of South Sudan, the Jing Council of Elders, and the Dinka community or the Dinka tribe as one thing is a destructive idea of Carol Berger. And I must say it very clearly to all of you in the room. And this one represents her true intention behind the whole paper, which I am yet to come and talk about in details. This will unquestionably ignite division along tribal lines. It is actually further igniting division along tribal lines because division has already been there since 2013. And there would be no difference between a corrupt and inept government which has plunged the country into the abyss of corruptions and civil war and divided our people along ethnic lines, and the opposition, which is calling on the same people to rally behind it in order to topple the same government. I am mindful that the book or the paper we are discussing has caused controversial debates and stimulated negative sentiments in the hearts of our people 4 weeks ago or so, and most of the Jing sons and daughters felt that they were being targeted. As I speak here, the Jing people are uniting for not for a revolution or toppling the government, but for confronting what they have perceived to be a war against them. And I entered so many rooms and I listened, and this is what I got. It's not something that I'm making up. It's something that is already there. So in my opinion, this is not a solution, but a complication, which will not yield positive result for all of us. Let's continue, therefore, to criticize the government of South Sudan and the wrong policies of Jing elites, organize ourselves against the government in order to bring the change we are all yearning for, and leave alone the common men and women of Jing or the Jinka who are not part of government's policies. And by doing so, I am sure that we, as the opposition, will win them to our side and make our quest for change attainable. Now let me go to the main themes of the paper. Let me talk about the main themes of BERGER'S third paper. They are succinctly found in the abstracts. And this is what she said in the abstracts. She said, this working paper documents the strategy of the Dinka-led government of South Sudan to achieve dominance over the state's instruments of power and claim the land of non-Dinka peoples. The findings are the outcomes of extended ethnographic fieldwork in war-affected regions of South Sudan. This strategy, years in the making, began with the displacements of non-Dinka populations. As the title state, ethnocide has been employed as a tool of state building, this ethnocide, led by the country's organized forces, the National Army, police, and irregular militarized groups, is characterized by the indiscriminate killing of civilians based on ethnicity and the systemic use of rape against women and men. The state has targeted Nilotic-speaking populations of Nuer and Shilluk along the borders of Ethiopia and Sudan, Bantu speakers from Equatorial region bordering Uganda and Kenya, and Fertit, Balanda, and Luo peoples of Greater Bahar Ghazal region, northwestern South Sudan. Having achieved mass displacement on large parts of the country, the president then put into law measures that disenfranchised non-Dinka peoples, including the remapping of the country into gerrymandered states and counties that ensures a Dinka monopoly over national and regional decision-making. The paper examines the complex drivers, both from the state and whether intentional or not, the international community that have brought this plan for Dinka supremacy to fruition, end quote. You find this on page 1, that is the abstract. And so from this short summary of the paper, we can know and understand the main themes of the research. And you can put them down like this. Number one would be the political dominance of the Dinka-led government over states' instruments of power. This is one of the themes she's talking about. Number two, claiming the land of non-Dinka peoples in order to make it a Dinka land, that is by the state. And number three, the tool used for claiming the lands of non-Dinka by the Dinka-led government. And she talked about these tools. She said these are destabilizations of region bordering traditional Dinka lands, displacements of non-Dinka populations, the use of the National Army, police, and irregular militarized groups, and these are the militias, and the national security to kill indiscriminately non-Dinka and displacing them. The use of rape as a weapon against women and men for humiliations and psychosomatic defeat. I put this one as number three. Number four is what she called remapping of the country into gerrymandered states and counties in order to ensure the Dinka monopoly of national and regional decision making. And she talked about what she called normalizations of the displaced towns after people were displaced and killed. And then the government came in to normalize the displaced town. Number five could be the complex drivers, both internally and externally, that brought the plan of what she called Dinka supremacy to fulfillment. Now, let me go to the details. On the issue of Dinka claiming the land of non-Dinka peoples in order to make it a Dinka land, I doubt this claim, and there must be a thorough search that justifies this allegation, not by a foreigner, but by a national. I have not heard of such a plan by the Dinka. On the other hand, it is crystal clear that the issue of land, according to Carol Berger, is no longer about individual grabbing small plots of land in Juba or in other parts of Equatoria, but a plan and a strategy by the Dinka-led government to take the whole land of South Sudan and make it a Dinka land. This is what she's telling us. So Carol Berger is telling the entire civilized world that the Dinka people and the Dinka-led government has a plan and a strategy of displacing non-Dinka peoples in order to take over the entire South Sudan. And for them to do this, they are using what is called ethnocide, or they are employing what is called ethnocide. Ethnocide, of course, has the same meaning as genocide. I looked it up in the dictionary, and what I found was that ethnocide means destroying the culture of people. And you cannot separate culture with people. If you are targeting a culture of people, then it means you are targeting the people, because culture is something that is always attached to human being. So what is being said by Carol Berger, and from what I understand from the paper, there is this issue of generalizations that I alluded to earlier, that three things are made to be one. One, the government of South Sudan. Two, the Jiang Council of Elders. You know my opinion already about the Jiang Council of Elders. And then the Dinka. So these three are made one. And this is a very big mistake committed by Carol Berger. And it's not only Carol Berger, but also other South Sudanese who have read her working paper are taking it that way. So Carol Berger is telling the entire civilized world that the Dinka has a plan and a strategy of displacing non-Dinka peoples in order to take over the entire South Sudan, with ethnocide being employed as a tool for achieving this goal. This is not true, and it will remain untrue, because we need justification for this. On the issue of tools being used for claiming and seizing the lands of non-Dinka by the Dinka-led government, we ought to notice in this particular point that there is, again, generalization, and that there is no distinction made by Carol Berger between the wrong policies of the government and the elites and the innocent Dinka people who are not even aware of the alleged strategy. And so the whole Dinka is being criminalized, and it is being crucified for the mistakes which the government is supposed to be held accountable for. Is this fair? The answer is obvious. And because of this, we see the growing hate speech on social media directed towards the Dinka elites in the government, and I have no problem with that. The Jain Council of Elders, and I have no problem with that. And Dinka as a tribe, and this is where I have a problem, especially the Dinka of Bahr al-Ghazal. I have personally asked some brothers who are actively involved in this dangerous trend to disengage from generalization, but they misconstrued my words. They misunderstood my words, and they considered me as someone who is defensive of a tribe. And this tells us who we are. We are a people who, when someone talks and tells facts, we don't listen to the facts. Instead, we look at each other from tribal lenses. On the issue of remapping the country into gerrymandered states and counties to ensure what she called Dinka monopoly of national and regional decision making, I believe many Dinka have refused the 28 ethnic states, later on increased to be 32 ethnic states. There must be a distinction between the wrong policies of the government and the Dinka community. Anyway, I am mindful that mixing the three things, the government of the Republic of South Sudan, the Jain Council of Elders, and the Jain community is a deliberate thing. It is something that is intended, whether by Carol Berger in this working paper or by other South Sudanese who agree with her in generalization. Additionally, the self-appointed Jain Council of Elders is most of the times being used as a pretext for attacking the Dinka on social media. But the good thing is that there had been a lot of talk about the Dinka even before the formation of Jain Council of Elders in 2013, because Jain Council of Elders came up, I think, in 2014. But people have been talking about Jain in general before the formations of Jain Council of Elders. And that's why I'm saying that sometime that the Jain Council of Elders is used as a pretext through which the Jain as a society is attacked. If you attack the political elites and you criticize them, I have no problem with that. If you talk about the government, I have no problem with that. But when you talk about the common man and the common women, then this is where the problem comes. We must learn to differentiate between things. So I would like now to take you through some quotes from the book and then make my comments on these quotes. I would like to quote from page 2. This is what Carol Berger says. She said, the title of this paper, Ethnocide as a tool of state building, South Sudan and the never-ending war, speaks to the rise of ethnic nationalism among South Sudanese from majority Dinka ethnic group. Again, you can see that she's talking about the rise of ethnic nationalism among South Sudanese. And then she's saying, especially the Dinka ethnic group. The question that can be asked is it only among the Dinka people that ethnic nationalism is rising, or is it among all the people of South Sudan? Then she went on to say this. For almost 5 years, the country's Dinka-led government and national army, the Sudan People Liberation Army, SPLA, have engaged in a brutal war against non-Dinka civilian populations and armed groups. Within this state of never-ending war and the consequent humanitarian crisis, the international humanitarian community has shifted its policies toward two priorities: peace building and normalizations of ethnically cleansed towns and territories now occupied by the Dinka-led state or its aligned forces. This is on page 2. And then she went on also to say this. I'm just reading. I want you as listeners to judge what she's saying through these quotations that I'm quoting. On page 3, this is what she said. She said, the strength of this paper is my insight into the thinking of the Dinka community. Now you can see here that she's talking about the Dinka community. She's not talking about the Jain Council of Elders, and she's not talking about the government of the Republic of South Sudan. And she's saying that the strength of her paper, she's telling us that the strength of her paper is her insight into the thinking of the Dinka community, both the elites, now she's talking about the elites, and people living in the regions. She's talking about the elites and the ordinary or the common men and women in different regions of South Sudan. In some quarters, my observations will be considered unduly harsh. This is what she's saying. I would point out that I have quoted extensively from on-the-record interviews in which a wide variety of Dinka people state clearly what their objectives are. These include members of the elites, the self-declared Jain Council of Elders, clergy, and the SPLA. They do not hide their sentiment toward their fellow co-nationals, and they, more than anyone else, know the extent of criminality by state actors. That is now the norm and the ever-present threats of violence to control not only the non-Dinka population, but also their own people. This is on page 3. So what I want to say through this, again, 3 things are mixed again. The government of the Republic of South Sudan, or the elites, the Dinka elites that are in the government, the common man, and the Jain Council of Elders. These are now put together, which means, or which suggests, that the government of the Republic of South Sudan, the Jain Council of Elders, and the common Dinka men and women equally share the guilt. This is what she's telling us.
And now she went on to say this on page 4. She said, less well understood is the state-directed shifting of Dinka civilians and state operatives, including military and personnel from the National Security Service, into non-Dinka territories. From this starting point, I was able to better define what I would argue in the central driving force within the South Sudan conflict: ethnic nationalism among the Dinka community, coupled with a long-planned campaign to redraw the state boundaries of the country. Dinka supremacy has been achieved. Fueling these efforts and legitimizing the grievous violence against non-Dinka peoples is an orchestrated campaign of disinformation intended to instill a sense of grievance and victimizations among the wider Dinka population. Now, from what I have read, I would allow you to judge. I don't want to say something myself with regard to the quote I have just read. Now, on page 9, she said the following. She said, I would note in this context that attempt to represent the conflict as between two men, Machar and Kir, are misguiding or even purposeful. The intent is to promote the idea that two men are competing for power and to understand the ethnocide enmity between South Sudanese people. The conflict, not including several minorities, ethnicities, is the outcome of years of incitements, of creating the conditions for what the state has presented as defensive rather than offensive military action in support of ensuring the Dinka community full control of the state. This is on page 9. Now, she's telling us that the story of Kir and Machar competing for power or power struggle within the SPLM is misguiding. That's what she's saying. And here I disagree with her, because initially it was the SPLM that had its political internal differences. It started as a political competition within the SPLM party, and then it later on developed and took an ethnic dimension when the Nuer were killed and many other South Sudanese were killed in South Sudan. So I believe that the conflict in South Sudan started as a political competition within the SPLM, because in fact the SPLM sat down at Nyakurun Cultural Center and they were discussing their party affairs, and then they disagree on the issue of voting through secret ballot and through the show of hands. And the good thing is that my brother Ian Matthew, who was the spokesperson of the SPLM at that time, is here and he's listening. So I disagree with Carol Berger on the issue of saying that the issue of conflict in South Sudan is starting as a political conflict is misguiding. I do believe that it was a political conflict, and then it developed later on and took tribal dimension. I am also mindful that South Sudanese were divided along ethnic groups even before the eruptions of the 2013 civil war, because there were rumors. I could hear rumors then that some SPLM figures were doing this. And you know, in South Sudan, sometimes facts are fake or facts are circulated in form of rumors. And if you ignore them, you later on come to discover that the facts which you ignored are now the reality of the day. Now, I want to go on to quote what somebody said, a UN staffer in Malakal on page 15 of the research. I quote, it is a very short one. The Dinka are not prepared to give these people, meaning the Sholo and the Nuer in the town of Upper Nile, any space to exist. Now, when you look at this, the speaker did not say the government of South Sudan and the Joint Council of Elders are not prepared to give these people, the Nuer and the Sholo, any space to exist. It says the Dinka are not prepared to give these people, the Cholo and the Nuer, any space to exist. So the whole thing is about the Dinka here. It's not about the government of South Sudan. It's not about the Joint Council of Elders. It's about Dinka as a community here. Now, on the issue of land, Carol Berger is saying that the Dinka-led government has a plan and a strategy to seize the land of non-Dinka people and make it a Dinka land. And I disagree with her on this point for one reason. When she talked about the issue of land, she even mentioned that there is a land dispute between the Dinkas themselves. If you go to page 14 of the paper, you will find that she's talking about the Tweed Dinka and the Ngok Dinka. This is what she said. Let me quote. She said, members of the Tweed Dinka have been accused of seeking to annex some parts of the Abyei area to the newly created Tweed state. This includes Ngok Dinka land that lies south of the River Kir, in particular Charles Majab, the chair of the Special Joint Council Committee, is tracked to revive the states of South Sudan, has been named as being responsible for the attempts, which he has denied. Bona Malwal, a Tweed Dinka, and also a member of the Joint Council, is said to be behind the lobbying to claim the Ngok land. Now, Carol Berger is talking about a strategy by the government of the Republic of South Sudan and the Joint Council of Elders and the Jin as a community, that they have a strategy and a plan of killing the other South Sudanese, which are non-Dinkas, displacing them in order to take their land. Now, you find her here talking about the Tweed Dinka and the Ngok Dinka. So you can see that the issue of land is no longer about a Dinka killing and displacing other people in order to occupy their land. Because Tweed and Ngok here are both Dinka. So you can judge here. It would have been true if Carol Berger would have said that the government of South Sudan and the Joint Council of Elders, these two entities, are the one doing this without including the Dinka, the Dinka or the common man of Dinka, common men and women of Dinka. So I disagree with her on this point. And this one indicates that she have an agenda. Okay, on the same page 14, she talked about the issue of land dispute between the Tweed Dinka and the people of Mayom, the Bull Nuer, in Unity State. And then she talked about the Ruweng and Abiemnum and Rupkona, and in places like Pariang. From what I know, there is no a land dispute between the Twitch Dinka, the Twitch Mayardi Dinka, and their fellow brothers from the Bulnuer of Mayom. What I know between them is cattle wrestling. Cattle wrestling is what I know between these two communities. And maybe I am ignorant of the issue of land dispute. However, this is the first time to learn about this through this paper. And as I was reading the paper, I asked many sons. I asked about 4 of them. And they are from Bulnuer, they are from Bantu. I asked them whether there is a dispute between them and their brothers, their neighboring brothers in Twig Mayardi. And what I got was the same thing I've just said. They said to me that they don't have any border dispute or land disputes. What they have is cattle wrestling. They fight over cattle or cattle raiding between them from time to time. And so this issue needs to be investigated further. I look at it as a claim. I think Carol Berger would be right on the issue of Rupkona, the issue of dispute between Biomnom, Ruweng, and Pariang, and then Rupkona, these 3 areas. Because even when Ruweng was made a state, President Kiir himself was heard in the media or talking publicly saying that the oil that is in Upper Nile falls into the Dinka land. So this issue, I think there is an issue of land dispute here. All right. So this is what I can say concerning this, and you can make your own comments or interjections later on. Now, when you go to page 23 of the same paper, there is a denial of Dinka massacres. Carol Berger is denying that Dinkas were not killed, when at the same time she admits that non-Dinkas were killed, and I also believe that non-Dinkas were killed. The Sholo were killed, the Nuer were killed, some citizens in Wau that went out to reject the governor's decision to transfer Wau County to Bagari in 2012 were killed, all right, and others. But when it comes to the issue of Dinka that were killed, Carol Berger denies the claim. And this is what she said on page 23, and I quote. She said, these claims, the claims of killing, because there were claims that some Dinkas were killed and their bodies were mutilated and some were crucified. And then she said this: these claims of mutilations and crucifixions appear to be untrue. I say this having attempted back in 2013 and to this year to verify Dinka claims. I could not, nor could the medical examiner who created the state's accounts and later went missing. He is presumed dead. But it follows a pattern of disinformation about the mutilation of Dinka men and boys, including reports of castrations and the chopping of ears and lips. These claims have been made for several years by a wide range of Dinka sources, including the author and former politician Bwana Malwal, long connected to St. Anthony College of Oxford University, military officers, politicians, and ordinary people. Beginning from 2014, the claims were that the Dinka people were being killed in grievous ways and their bodies mutilated. Dinka officials continue to perpetuate the belief that Equatorians and others are committing atrocities. A senior SPLA officer in Kwajok told me in March 2018. Now, you will understand from here that there was a complaint by the Dinka that their fellow brothers were killed, and after they were killed, their bodies were mutilated, some were crucified. And now Carol Berger is denying this, saying that these allegations were not true and that she made investigation into this and she couldn't find this. And everybody aware that even the Dinka, as citizens of South Sudan, were targeted on ethnic basis, and you are all aware on many massacres that took place in 2013 when the Nuer retaliated or revenge against the killings of their brothers in Bor, in the oil fields and other areas. And then you all remember the issue of the Juba-Nimli Road killings, the Ye-Juba Road killings, and many others. Because after all, these are all civilians, whether they are Dinkas, whether they are Sholo, whether they are Nuer, whether they are from Equatoria, they are all citizens of South Sudan. And when they are killed, we feel the pain equally. And we should not deny that a group of certain people were not killed, or a group of people that belong to a certain ethnic group were not killed. So Carol Berger is not fair here. She is very biased, and she's trying to deny that Dinkas were not killed. Now on page 26 of the same paper, this is what she said. She said, Dinka civilians are allowed to carry weapons throughout most of South Sudan, while non-Dinka civilians are not. The imbalance in power with the state controlled by Dinka interests has meant systemic encroachment on minority people's land for well over a decade. I have written in previous reports, the incursions begin with the movement of cattle herds beyond their traditional grazing areas, which results in the damaging of crops cultivated by indigenous peoples, and is followed by the arrival of security forces to protect the herds and eventually to displace the original inhabitants. But perhaps the most powerful coded expression is taking towns to the countryside. Now, there are a lot of things she's saying, mainly three things in this quotation. She's saying that Dinka civilians, just look at the language is even strange. That the Dinka civilians are allowed to carry weapons throughout most of South Sudan, while the non-Dinka are not allowed. And that this is an imbalance which is intended to control the state of South Sudan. From what I know, citizens or civilians in South Sudan are armed. Most of them are armed. The Nuer are armed, the Dinka are armed, the Sholo are armed, the Equatorian are armed. All the citizens have guns. So when Carol Berger says that the Dinka civilians are allowed to carry guns, I don't believe that this is true. This is not true at all. On the issue of cattle arriving into the farms of other communities and destroying the crops, this is true, and I personally condemn this. And then she said that those cattle herds that go and damage crops in other people's areas or areas that belong to other communities, that when the inhabitants complain about the damage of their crops, then the next move is the arrival of the security forces, and then people are displaced and the land is paved in front of the cattle headers in order to continue to graze their cattle in the area. This is an accusation which is directed towards the government, and and I'm not here to defend or to talk on behalf of the government. So I have no much to say on this issue here or about this claim. And then she said she talked about the codes, the coded expressions that are used to justify this claim. The issue of taking the towns to the countryside. You will all remember that it was Dr. John Garang who was talking about development, and he was saying that development would be done by taking the towns to the countryside or to the rural area. But Carol Berger is saying that the government of the Republic of South Sudan is displacing the civilians in order to seize their land in the context of what is said to be taking towns to the villages. Again, this is another accusation directed to the government, and I have nothing to say because the government of South Sudan is there to defend itself. Now, another thing, accusation that is leveled against the Dinka as a community, is the issue of universities. You are all aware that there were so many universities open in Juba, and those universities lack standards, the academic standard or the scientific standards. So Carol Berger is saying that those universities were open in order to ensure that the Dinkas get degrees in order to get jobs. And that Professor Adwog Nyaba in 2016 shut down those universities, and that he was threatened by the SPLA commanders. Truly those universities were shut down by Peter Adwog. But I don't know what is the connection between the Dinka community and those universities. Again, you can see the intentions of Carol Berger towards the Dinka as a society. Now, on page 35, this is what she said. She quoted a resident of Wau town having said this: the ideology of the Dinka is to move all the people. Again, you would understand that Carol Berger, through the quote, or through this quote attributed to a resident of Wau, is not talking about the government of the Republic of South Sudan here. Neither is she talking about the Jain Council of Elders. She's talking about the Dinka as a society, as a community, as a tribe. Because from the reading, it is very clear that the ideology of the Dinka is to move all the people. That the ideology of the Dinka is to kill all South Sudanese and move them away from South Sudan in order to control South Sudan as their own state. This is not true, of course, and I disagree with her in saying this. Now, ladies and gentlemen in the room, this paper written by Carol Berger, in my conclusion, is a conspiracy, not only against the Dinka as one of our national components, but also against the entire South Sudan as a country. This is what I see in the paper. It is against South Sudan because the neo-colonial policies of capitalizing on the national problem of African nations and encouraging the divisions of the among the African people on ethnic basis so that resources can be plundered is clearly manifested through this paper. In this paper, the writer is setting South Sudanese against each other. And as we speak, there is an extra hatred among South Sudanese fueled by this paper. Division and bitterness is already there among South Sudanese against each other. And as a result of internal factors which led to a heated conflict and this paper is pouring more oil on the already burning fire. This is what I see in the paper. This is what the writer wanted to encourage through this paper. We should not allow the deadly virus being intentionally spread through this paper to infect our minds. The paper is painted in such a way that injects the venom of hate, political extremism, and tribal bigotry into the veins of South Sudanese. This is what I see in this paper. The writer has alleged to be an independent researcher, has exploited the blunders of the state officials as a tool for making a political propaganda against one ethnic group in the country, that is the Dinka, so that the other South Sudanese can unite and rise up against the Dinka and fights them in what will become a terrible genocidal war. This is what I see in this paper. Carol Berger wrote this paper to ensure that South Sudan is turned into another Hotel Rwanda, a scenario of the 1994 Rwandan genocide in Africa. This is what I see between the lines in this paper. This paper is written to ensure that South Sudan is turned into another European concentration camps of the 1930s, in which the German Nazi Party burned 6 million Jews. This is what I see all over the pages of this paper. This paper is written to push South Sudan into another blood diamond scenario in Africa. And this is what I clearly see in this paper. This paper, dear brothers and sisters in the room, this paper cunningly states many obvious facts so that South Sudanese can take it seriously. But there is a hidden poison in the details and the practical outcome, which shall become deadly. This is what I see in this paper. Genocides and Holocaust for South Sudan is the intended scheme that I see in this paper. This paper must be considered as a threat to the existence of South Sudanese as a people and South Sudan as a country. It is written with an intention of pushing South Sudan into genocidal abyss so that the masterminds behind this conspiracy can get their best chance to plunder our raw materials and natural resources, as it happened in many parts of the world. I do not buy the story in this paper, nor do I subscribe to it. Neither do I agree with those praising and promoting it. Until here, I rest my case, and I give the microphone back to you, dear moderators. Thank you very much.
شكرا كثير استاذ زين العيوب على الورقه اللي انت قدمته وتحليلك يعني بالنسبه للكاتبه كارول برجر. ننطلق مباشره للاستاذ زين ماتيو، هو يقدم مداخلته وبنجدد الترحاب بكل الناس اللي انضموا علينا، وزي ما هو الناس اللي انضموا الاستاذ زين العيوب بيتكلموا عن البحث اللي كان يتكتب من الباحثة كارول برجر حول الراحل في جنوب السودان. فنحن حنلتقي مباشرة الأستاذ زين ماتيو، ومن ثم حندي فرص للأسئلة والمداخلات. ونحن في الفاتحة طبعا اتكلمنا وقلنا إنه الحديث حول الورق هي حديث علمي بحتا، زي ما أستاذ زين أدى السرد بتاعه منذ البداية لحد ما هو يوصل في الفترة الختامية. ونتمنى انه النقاش يكون نقاش هادف، نقاش موضوعي، وما اثاره الفتن وقلق الصراعات داخل الروم. فاي زول يرفع يده نتمنى انه هو يلتزم حول الورقه ويتكلم في المسار اللي كان يتكلم فيه الاستاذ زنجي وقدم له الورقه يعني. فالفرصه الجايه حيكون جنرال يان ماتيو. استاذ يان لك المنصه.
Well, thank you so very much again. I would like to register my gratitude to the moderators and the listeners as well. The topic of today, or this room, has been opened in favor of analysis of Carol Berger's book. And of course, as far as my knowledge is concerned, the term analysis can be understood in the form of either the appreciation of the book, its authenticity, and how authentic the book is, or it can be simply a critique to her book in a way that what she wrote is not authentic. Or it could be what we call extended analysis, textual extended analysis of any literature that is available for people to look up, whether it's themes or forms and structures and on and on. This I would like to make very clear from the very beginning, that my analysis to this book would be purely academic, and I don't want to politicize the issue. And of course, when I suggest that it should be academic, the book might be a claim, and that is the first thing, because there are so many statements in the book. But then the question would be whether these claims are vindicated or supported by inference or by evidences. This is how books are looked at. I wrote a paper on this, and actually the presentation was supposed to be made on the 5th January 2022 at 18 hours, at 800 hours. Very unfortunately, it was extended to very technical problems that we both had as speakers. Now today came the adjournment and adjournment of the 5th to the 16th. Before I could go further to the book, I would like to just remind you of what I'm interested actually to tackle. And of course, if it is a book and we want to look at its authenticity, I would suppose it has to be critiqued on, first of all, not political lenses, not on emotional lenses, but on purely literary availed evidences or schools of literature, because this is a painting. And not just general literature, but a literature that is a non-fiction. And of course, a non-fiction is a type of literature that speaks about the reality. And on the other hand, we have a fictional literature, which is actually imagined and imaginated. Now, this presentation, therefore, to me would be an appreciation, but a critique, verily. I would like to take these two ways of this painting, ethnocide as a tool of state building, South Sudan, and the never-ending war. Now, in due appreciating of the text, I would love to reflect a little bit on the category of the painting to cross-check the authenticity of the paper by highlighting the hypothesis. And to me, this is very important. First of all, academic-wise, is the book authentic? يعني أكاديميا هل الكتاب ده ممكن يكون موثوق منه؟ Based on academic criteria that are available given the non-fiction literature? This I would like to learn. Secondly, I would like to look at the hypothesis, not just cross-check the authenticity, but basically what is this lady hypothesizing, or doctor would be a good word rather. I'm sorry to say this lady, please. And again, I would like to look at its genre and the point of view. By the way, point of view is really very important. And point of view does not in literature mean what is her stance or what is her own ideal. No. Point of view in literature simply means the stance of a writer on whether the writer was involved or partook in one hand, and then whether the writer was told about what happened, or whether the writer is talking about other people. Now, this is what we mean by point of view. Subsequently, I will give a nutshell of her objectives, based on her objectives, because if you want to judge a book, you see the objectives of what she wants to say, and you judge the book accordingly. It is not allowed by syllogism to just generalize and give a critique or appreciation of the book without what we call contextual and textual exegesis in literature. And so this will help me also investigate and shed light on the methodologies and the tools she used to deploy and collect her data. Now, which scientific methodology did she use to collect her data? Which scientific methodology did she use to analyze her data? And which scientific methodology did she use to give general analysis of the book? Now, once I finish doing this, I would definitely give my conclusion. But I have loved also from the very beginning that before I conclude, I want to also look at the critiques of other writers who actually attacked Carol Berger, because it's really very important that we consider them so that we have a general knowledge about what other scholars say about it. Of course, so many people that have attacked Carol Berger's book regionally, internationally, and nationally within South Sudan, especially our beloved people from Jim community. But there are other scholars which also gave a critique to her book, eminently Professor Madud. I would speak about him later. He also gave a critique, and then there was a critique of some scholars who come from London School of Economics. They also gave a critique. I would love also to touch what they say, and then I will give my stance as a literature person, because I am a literature person. I am a literacy by career, by profession. That's how I would love to tackle the issue. Please, moderators, am I heard?
Yes, go on here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so very much. Now, in the beginning, I would like to look at the form and the structure of the book or of the paperwork. Of course, before looking at form and the structure, it's really very important to help our audience understand these two literary terms, form and structure, so that they are able to see and have the same lenses upon which I am trying to build my analysis, critique, or appreciation on the other hand. Now, the form in literature is the style in which a piece of text is written. Now, Carol Berger's thing is a work paper, so is a text, and it is a non-fiction literature. So what we are saying, according to Singer and Walker, 2013, in their book, Bending Genera, Essays on Creative Nonfiction, they gave a definition of what the form is. And they have said the form is the style in which a piece of text is written, whereas a structure donates the major elements of a text, such as plot, such as partakers or characters, if it is nonfiction, such as setting, and for setting it can be a historical setting or geographical setting or time setting or literary setting or place setting and so forth, or geographical setting would be the best. Or it can be literary styles and it can be themes, as Ustaz Dengi suggested. But he, in his opinion, he just tackled the themes. I would love to deepen my analysis a lot and also see the setting, the partakers, and the whole plot and the literary styles Carol Berger's used. Now, that is the definition that Walker and Singer gave, so that we have a common understanding of what form and structure is, as I'm suggesting that let us look at the form and structure of this piece of text, or what I would love to call a painting, because it is our own writing. So I call it a painting. Now, in Carol's painting, the plot is introduced by giving a resolution of what she wants to talk about. And then she intends, as an anthropologist, to describe phenomenally. She was actually describing different phenomena, starting from different times before she started to give her analysis. ودي نقطة مهمة، إنه كارول بيرجر أصلاً ما عدد التحليل حقتها في زهرة واحدة، اتكلمت عن مجموعة من الظواهر وعدت الوصف وعلى ضوء عدد التحليل. This is really very important. Now, this resolution was followed by a crisis complication. Crisis complication, of course, is one of the elements of any plot, that any plot starts with a resolution, because she was actually giving an account of real facts or phenomena that are happening in South Sudan. And so she went further when the complication of the crisis went deep and complicated. And then she resolves by what ended into an ethnocide, and what ended to ethnic cleansing, and what ended into genocide as a resolution of her work. Vehemently, the structure, of course, in literature, as we know, affects the meaning of the text by organizing it as well as embellishing the theme of the writing. This is to suggest, in a way or the other, that structure is really very important, because it has got elements, it has got the setting, it has got the themes, it has got the literary styles. So it does two things usually. It organizes the account in a way that is chronological, in a way that is orderly, so that people are able to see the connection and harmony of the writing. But it also embellishes. It uses some embellishment. It uses some beautification. It uses some linguistic decoration. That's what we mean by embellishment. And indeed, Carol Berger used very advanced embellishment in her writing, such as ironies, such as oxymorons, are really very important things to do. Now, this is very short in the beginning to touch a little bit on the form in a structure. Now, the paper is just a summary of sundry interactions, myriad interactions, so many interactions. Sometimes she would interview and she would interact with members of the GM Council. Sometimes she would go and interact with some responsible people who had suggested for their names not to be mentioned, but she made recorded interviews with them. And sometimes she would interview those that she regarded as victims. And sometimes she would interview to see the mixed feelings of different people. Now, this is very important for us to know and to help in analysis. Now, by this she observed because she was there. Secondly, she detected information across the years 2006 and 2013. And in literature, we call it meta-analysis, even in research, that she also used some literature that has been already written, and that is what we call meta-analysis. Now, meta-analysis is actually using the available written and authenticated literature or documents that have been written and analyzed on those bases. Please, this is actually very important, and it must help us in an analysis later. That first of all, she did interactions, which she observed or she detected, but she also analyzed her beliefs based on the data availed from her presence in South Sudan since 2006 to 2018. This is really very important. Now, the composite of the text is about 7 to 4 pages, where she subheads the issues into themes and sub-themes. Simply, she did that because she's giving accounts. Everybody knows in literature, once you are writing a scientific paper work, then you write it in forms of themes and sub-themes, which is actually very important because we do not need to suggest, we do not need scientifically to suggest for Carol Berger as to what are her themes. She has already said what are her themes. That is number 2. The antecedent of the abstract and the introduction of the painting discusses the mechanics of the state building by ethnocide. Then she delves into the debate of the roles played by the national security, as well as the organized forces and the allied irregular forces. And I don't want to talk on that because Ustaz also Denby mentioned very honestly with that regard, with a lot of scientific sincerity to that. But what we are saying that she started actually after Abbas struck an introduction, she started speaking about the mechanics or the practices or the activities of how the state thinks that it should be built through a policy of ethnocide or genocide or ethnic cleansing. After that, she jumps or she delves into the debate of what the security forces did, the national security, the army, and then the other allied irregular forces, such as Matianganyor and the other militias of Salva Kiir. Now therein, she posits and exposes internal Dinka disputes and the SPLA asymmetrical forces. Of course, the SPLA asymmetrical forces are paramilitary forces, but she loved to say asymmetrical because that's a scientific term. But in the army, we know it is paramilitary forces that are not organized. Now, please, I'm just saying what she said. These are not my words. She then exposes a bunch of interviews and synthesis of fact-finding, which she terms the power of words, dog whistles, and coded language. The interviews inveterated state-led population shifts, what the state has been doing to and fro. Then she started deliberating this part alongside what she named ABA, cattle sales and putting down roots in disputed lands. And that's when she spoke actually about the Ngok and the Twitch Dinka groups having some disputes over some peripheral land issues. Further, Carol draws examples to prove her arguments. By the way, this is very important. There is never a statement that Carol said without supporting her argument. Otherwise, I need to be corrected. So everything that she said, she supports it either with an account or she supports it with other referential ways of that are known to the people. And of course, the whole argument is about change of demography and remapping South Sudan. And thus, she draws examples from Greater Upper Nile under a title and a theme called Going Forward, according to her, of course. And then she spoke about atrocities that were planned, not imagined. She spoke about atrocities that were planned and orchestrated intentionally. Now, in an attempt to evidence the claim strategy, she subheads it as intentional engagement, and thus talks in length of the master plans drawn earlier before 2013. And remember, I had spoken about that. Now, all these arguments she made are recorded in pages 7 to 16, pages 16 to 20, pages 25 to 28, pages 29 to 39, pages 39 to 42, pages 44 to pages 49, pages 49 to 52, pages 2 to 59, and then page 60. All that I have been saying, that's where she made her hypothesis. Now, at the finish of her painting, at the finish of her writing, she speaks of the normalization of occupied towns and territories. That too, she entails the events orderly, followed by what she entitles humanitarian and erasure of conflicts, ethnic diversities. And that is actually in page 6. Now, that is a general overview of what Carol Berger did in her book, because we cannot give analysis to the book without giving actually of what exactly she did. Now, what is the rudimentary hypothesis of the painting? What is she trying to lead us into? Now, the writer hypothesizes or proposes, because you see scientifically, when you write a text, the first thing you do is what is your claim? After your claim, you give inference or evidences of what is your claim. And then people will be able to judge whether your claim is correct or not. And so for her to just say change of demographics is not enough, is not enough. That is just a claim philosophically. She has to prove it. That has to be proved. And so remapping South Sudan is also a claim. And it becomes just authentic until when she gives what we call inferences or what we call evidences to authenticate any inference. That is now general philosophy. And these are just basic rules. But before we could go into that, that is only her hypothesis. Now, the writer or the painter of this painting, Dr. Carol Berger, hypothesizes that ethnocide is being deployed as a tool of state building in South Sudan, a passage that makes the war stays still. It stays still. What Dr. Adwad Nyaba terms endless, and indeed what she terms never-ending war, and I also chose to say war stays still in a way or the other. So that is her hypothesis. Now, according to her, what did she want to research on? What did she want to know as she was writing her text? She said as she was writing her text that the sole objectives of her study were to document the activities of the Dinka-led government, what she termed Dinka-led government of South Sudan, in due achieving dominance of the state power and wealth. That was objective number 1. Number 2, to examine the complex drivers of war, namely the state intentional engagement and the geopolitical dynamics on the other hand. And thirdly, to substantiate the claims of land seizure of non-Dinka peoples, or what I would love to call land propitiation. Please, this is to remind us simply of the hypothesis, and this is to remind us of what she wants to do as an objective. I hope I made it short as to what was the hypothesis and what was exactly the objectives Carol said that she wanted to cross-check the painting about. Okay, now I want us to look at the genre of the painting. I want us to look about genre of the painting for us to be able to critique Carol. Now this painting, as I stated earlier, is just a mixture of non-fiction branches of literature, predominantly academic texting, philosophy, and insight. Please, it is very important. Now, the type of her writing is actually what we call non-fiction literature. And non-fiction literature is what we call academic texting, or what we call philosophy and insight. She must give her opinion as a scholar using syllogism. We cannot stop her to give analysis of the book or her insights, because that's what an academician does. giving philosophical insight. And then she uses history and biographies. And please, this is really very important. Actually, this is, I will connect it later to what I call the point of view. يا أخوانا دي حاجة مهمة. إنها بقى مرات بتستخدم حاجات في التاريخ. But very importantly, what we call biographies, because in non-literature writing, in non-fictional literature writing, we have what we call autobiographical. Autobiographical are writings where an individual writes his own or her own accounts. It's really very important. And actually, when you write about yourself or your opinion or where you partook, has got it's literally devices, it's literally approaches upon which we would look into such a text. But good enough that Carol Berger chose to write a biography. She was just speaking, describing about what she sees and talking about what she has been told meta-analytically. That is really very important. Now, therefore, the painting embraces historical accounts, lives of personal accounts, biographical accounts of the funds or partakers. Now, the funds are those exactly that were involved. Either they were involved as policy makers, either they were involved as funds, either they were involved as war victims, either they were involved as killing the civilians. Now, as argued by Daines, one of his scholars, and Merjakova, who are professors of literature, 2011, they stated this. But maybe before I could say they stated this, let me remind people of the reference. Academic writing and cultural identity, the case of Zik, academic writing in culture, in the styles of academic discourse. All these references are availed in that paper that I wrote, which would be availed later. Now, that is the reference, and I quote, academic writing, or sometimes called scholarly writing, is a non-fiction lettering fashioned as part of academic work, including reports on empirical fieldwork or research in facilities for the natural sciences or social science. And it is the subgenre of non-fiction that dominates Carol's work. That is really very important. Now, that what we call academic writing is sometimes usually called scholarly writing. What is this writing? It is a non-fiction lettering or writing, modeled or fashioned as part of academic work. And that and that includes reports and empirical field work. And that is what Carol Berger did. Carol Berger came herself. She was not just told, she came and witnessed herself. And that's why her work is very scientific and is very scholarly work. And actually, as an anthropologist, she used what we call ethnography. And ethnography in anthropology does not just happen. You have to detect yourself, you have to observe, you have to interact, you have to come personally. You do not only need to be told. That is really very important. Now, though Carol dwells on writing her account, I unquoted already, please. This is my observation. Though Carol dwells on writing her account by deploying interviews and meta-analytical evidence, yet she is also seen drawing philosophy and insight in her analysis of the mirrored incidents. Further, she uses histories. And history is the study and the documentation of the past. So it's not just a lie. It is an umbrella term comprising past events, as well as the memory, discovery, collection, organization, presentation, and interpretation of these events. Please, that is really very important, because later on, I will conclude with my own observations as a literature person. But I am basing my argument on facts of scholars. not just emotional speaking. Now, let me come to the point of view. And point of view helps us actually in seeing whether the book is authentic or not. Now, in literature, the point of view refers to who is telling or narrating an event or a story in fictional works, or the painter's stance or the writer's stance in the narration, whether the writer or whether the painter is a participant, is an observer, or is informed about. Please, that is really very important. And so when I speak about the point of view, I am simply speaking about whether Carol Berger was a participant or was an observer or was informed about what she wrote. And that is really very important. Now, therefore, painting can be told from these angles, either from the first person view or the second person view or the third person's perspective. Writers used the point of view to express the personal emotions of either themselves or their characters or their friends or their partakers. And so the question would be, did Carol use I? Did she use you? Did she use he? Did she use she? Did she use it? Did she use we? Did she use they? Because the use of I, we, or you, or they, or it, or we will help us understand whether she was a participant or an observer or was just informed about, or the three of these levels of the point of view. I hope I am really very clear. Please, this is a very sensitive point. Let me translate it into Arabic. يا اخوانا البوينت اوف فيو دي حاجه مهمه دوما في اي كتابه بتاعت الليترشر. يعني انت لما تجي تدقق في كتابه اول حاجه بتسال نفسك هل ده مكتوب بضمير انا؟ طبعا لو زول قال انا عملت ونحن عملنا ده كده بورينا انه الزول ده كان جزء من الاحداث. او يتكلم بيو معناه اذا بدي وصف انت او انت، او بيتكلم بهو وهي وده ضمير عن غائب، وده كده بوريك انه الزول ده وراه او الزوله دي وروها. دي حاجه مهمه وده بتساعدنا في تحليل بعدين، لانه ده من الاسلوب الاساسيه في تحليل اي كتاب. او ممكن تكون ثلاثه النقاط دي، انه كارل بيرجر كانت جزء او كانت شافت او وروها في كل الاحيان، وبالتالي تكون لعبه الثلاثه ادوار دي. This is actually very important for our Arabic speakers to be able to follow with us. Now, in my opinion, the three primary points of view are first person, in which the narrator tells the account or the event or the story, as I reiterated earlier, if it is in the non-fiction, from his or her standpoint. For example, if I say I ate fish, that means it's me who ate fish, because I here is a doer, and ate is a verb in past, and fish is an object because it has been acted upon. But the pronoun, the personal pronoun I here, tells us exactly that this is a first person. Or the painter could have narrated his or her work in second point of view, in which the narrator tells an account about the reader or the viewer. For example, you ate fish. And the third person follows, in which the narrator may do the same thing and would just say he or she or they ate fish. And these would be definitely the others. Now the question is, on what account did she write? That is really very important. Now the point of view is important because a position or a perspective from which something is considered or evaluated counts in the extent of the authenticity of a piece of writing and exhibits the degrees of biasness. For example, in literature, I know if it is I or you or he or she or it tells me the degree of the biasness of the painter's understanding, the painter's participation, the painter's engagement, the painter's thoughts, and the painter's experiences, and thus displays the writer's depth of knowledge or insight and omniscience. Because if it is I, then that means the depth of the knowledge is too deep. If it is about you, the depth of the knowledge is partially deep. But if it is he about she, when they are the partakers or the funds, then the omniscience of the work is further in depth. This is what we say in literature. And by omniscience, I mean the extent or the magnitude of her knowledge or his knowledge of what has been written. It may be third person omniscient, it may be third person limited knowledge, it may be third person objective. That's what we call objective writing or omniscience writing. A writing that has happened on the basis of authenticated knowledge. It is not just suggestions of. Now, in short, I want to say this to remind us that Carol Berger deployed mixed research tools, yet her methodology abode on ethnography, descriptive research. Now, this is very important that she used availed information that have been documented already, but she has also used descriptive research where she used a tool of interview, because if it is descriptive research, it is either quantitative or it is either qualitative or qualitative if you would love, or quantitative if you would love. Although she dwelt a little bit on ethnographic work and descriptive interviews, which she observed and detected, but I have also realized that she actually interviewed people and the interviews are available. If an availability of the interviews, of course, remains and tells us about the degree of the authenticity of what she did. Now, the aim of an ethnographic work in most places is study is within a usability project, and actually is to get the under skin, and that is the term they use in sociology, to get the under skin information, the information that is hidden. And in ethnography, you usually unearth, you demine knowledge, and you unearth knowledge so that you show the degree of what you are talking on all associated issues. Now, the qualitative approaches are solely biography, and this is actually seen, ethnography or phenomenology, and that's what she did because she's actually giving accounts of what is happening, phenomenology of ethnocide, phenomenology of genocide, and then a phenomenon of ethnic cleansing. Of course, grounding such in theory of a case study, and the case study, according to her, is South Sudan, picking the state. Now, validated by one of the scholars, what I have just said has to be supported. I cannot just say it out of my mind. Now, validated by a professor called Hawati in 2019, is stated as this, I quote, "The ethnography approach collects data through direct observation of users in their natural environment rather. The objective of this type of research is to gain insights into how users interact with things in the natural environment." I unquote. This is Hawati 2019. And so it helps us understand what ethnographic work is. And that's what exactly Carol Berger did. Now, the dominant quantitative research approach of ethnography aims at the providence of rich and holistic insights into people's views and actions, as well as the nature. That is, sight, the sounds of the people and how they interact. When they speak their words, can you read their face, whether they are realistic or not? And of the locations they inhabit through the collection of detailed observations and interviews. And that's what Carol Berger did. Indeed, Carol's painting considered ethnographic research elements where the investigator expected to identify research questions. She stated the problem and thus chose a research locale based on well-studied criteria. This is according to me. And so I see that Carol's work is purely academic and is strongly actually categorized as a scholarly writing, unless otherwise help to nullify my argument. Dr. Carol formulated her method, which took into account all ethical considerations. And actually, when you are doing a research, that is what we call ethical considerations. You do not just steal information, you make consent. And actually, Carol Berger made appendices of her work and recorded works and consent of her writing from the government or from those that she interviewed. That also gives value to her work. And so we should actually regard that. That's one of the tools if we want to cross-check the authenticity of the book. Now, what are her findings? The ethnographic painting of Carol Berger, based on the sundry information exhibited, is resolute that one, that the non-Dinka abodes bordering Dinka lands underwent destabilization. That is finding number one in her conclusion. That there are tribes that are non-Dinka that have been destabilized from their land. And actually she gave evidence of that. Now the question whether it is done by Dinka or by the state is something I will come later. And that is really very important. But first of all, her argument is that the non-Dinka land has been taken. And indeed, she gave a lot of accounts, either from Upper Nile or from fruit eaters. And not only that, this can be evidenced by so many UN reports. Not only that, the Obasanjo report has spoken also in length about this. And so it cannot just be easily denied that this was not true. Is it not very true that certain lands of the non-Dinka have been taken? What about Tonj? Don't we have scientific evidence, even in Khartoum, where we have the records, or even in the UK, at the University of Durban? Don't we have records of who the land of Tonj belonged to? We know Tonj was originally certain people's land, and these are Bongo. Has it not been destabilized? Is she lying? Number two, aren't the British is speaking about an Agdia, Malakal, and Atar being as taller lands? These are documented books that are undisputed, and these are scientific documents. And actually, that's what Carol Berger is suggesting. Now, I'm just giving some examples of. Now, isn't Nimuli destabilized? Where are the indigenous people of Nimuli, the Mahdi? Are they there? That is Carol Berger's argument, number one, and the conclusion she made. Conclusion number two, that the non-Dinka populations are forced into displacement in numbers. Is this not very true? Where are the people of Dilep Hill? Where are the people of Makal? Where are the people of Anagdia? Where are the people of Nyamlel? Nyamlel originally we know is a Luo land. We know Wow, the capital of Bahr Ghazal state, is originally the land of Lua, whether being the Lua who moved later, but historically that was their capital. The Lua groups, including Balanda what? I have forgotten the name. A group of Balanda that is originally a Lua. That is originally their land. Now, is it still their land? Are they not forced into displacement in big numbers? Now, what about the Mahdi? Are they not forced in big numbers? What about Kaliko? Imagine somebody moving from Bahr Ghazal, from Bor up to Kaliko area. Kaliko is actually bordering Uganda and Congo. Imagine somebody would go further with his cows, kill people there, carrying big guns like 12.7, RP come in the army, and RPG. These guns, have they collected them from the Nile? So let us be realistic. This is one of the arguments that Carl Berger is making. And in fact, according to the records, the non-Dinka displaced and refugees are more than the Dinka and Jing great people themselves. This is a scientific fact. This is not politics. That's what Carol Berger is saying. Can we nullify this reality? Number 3, that the state is finally remarked in favor of Dinka peoples into gerrymandered states, which ensure Dinka monopoly. This is also a scientific fact. Now, the 13 states were just a gerrymandered demarcation that was not based on any scientific, and that's why it's gerrymandered. Gerrymandered means chaotic and disordered, unbased demarcation of the land, and actually based on 32 states. Just one question: when they were 28, who were the majority? Who had the majority of the states? When they were 32, who were the majority even in those states? Not only that, do you know, if you follow the main oil resources and poor semi-rich savanna resources were actually demarcated, being as part of the states that belonging to the Dinka majority. For example, take Lol. Lol state took Raja from Western Bahr Ghazal and attached and annexed it to Lol. But the question is, having annexed Raja to Lol, who were still the majority? They were the Jim people of the Abiam and Malwal. This is a fact, followed by Lua in northern Bahr Ghazal. Now, that is another fact. Again, you come to western Bahr Ghazal. There were another Jim group of Marial Bay that were annexed some of the historical land of Lua and fruit eaters. And they are there. They were also a part of that. So they made sure that at least they had a lot of majority. Now, statistically, if constituencies, geographical constituents were to be made, definitely the Dinka would be the majority in the parliament. And that definitely means monopoly. This is scientific. And that's what Carol Berger is saying. يعني زول ما بيقدر يكذب في كلام ده. ده ما داير emotional speak. This is a scientific fact. Otherwise, unless we want to joke. And that's what I was speaking about, based on literary argument or on the basis on the scientific research that is found. Now coming to Upper Nile State, some lands of Maban people, some lands of Longchuk. Longchuk is one of the counties that belonged to Greater Upper Nile by then. It was annexed to actually Eastern Upper Nile State. This means that some of Maban land was annexed to Jing-dominated state, where where Abalang stay, where Anyel stay, where Dongjol stay, where Ngonglualiak stay. And further, you see that some of the Cholo lands of Atar are also in the map annexed to Korflus. Can you see that now? And these are all fertile lands. These are all lands that are very rich. And we know, based on the historical and the availed literature at Durban University, we know who owns those lands. We know who owned those lands. Now, Anadia, Makal, and Dilep Hill, that historically are known to be Cholo lands, were annexed again to the Eastern Jim-dominated Upper Nile state. And this is what Carol Berger found in her study as a conclusion. Can someone dispute this? Isn't what she proved? She gave her evidence. We don't need even Carol Berger. Myself, I can give a lot of the scientific evidence on that. We don't even need Carol Berger. But because the argument is very scientific, we want to just stay on what she says. And so she concluded that the state is finally had remapped. Now, who made the remapping? Was it not the state? Was it not the state? Whether it was Jim policy or a strategy is something that I will speak later on. But remember, let me just give her conclusions first. Number 4 conclusion, the strategy was executed by organized forces, irregular militarized forces, and the national security. Which strategy? A strategy of remapping South Sudan, changing the map, and changing the demography. Actually, when you change the demography, that means you change the culture, you assimilate people, Not only that, you take the land, and automatically that is what we call ethnocide. And it is indeed a genocide. And linguistically, we know what it means, a species of. Like, for example, Jurbel, this is a very small, lovely group that has got a very strong culture, according to the anthropologists. Why should we finish them? Simply because they are small. This is a genocide. And you know, an ethnocide is to finish a whole sect of a clan or of a certain tribe. Now, 2013 incidents, who executed this? Now, the killing of the civilians in Western Bahr Ghazal, who executed it? Was it not the organized forces and the militias of the government? And now these asymmetrical forces and the national security, and Salva Kiir himself came and gave and he spoke in favor of his own people. Salva Kiir laman masha wow, who gal shinu? We still remember. And then 2013, what did Salva Kiir say? In literature, what does that mean? In the Tabul, we will not allow 1991 incidents to be repeated. Yani simply means we will not allow the Nuer to kill Dinkas again. معناه كده بالإنجليزي. يعني معناه إذن as a president, I am here to protect Dinka or Jim. And actually, Salva was correct. And I also agree with him. Because as a statement, it falls upon his shoulder to protect people. But the question would be, is it just his word to protect Jim when he could have protected also the Nuers, when he could have protected the Equatorian, the Mahdi people, وأراضي الشايلين في جبدة, and taking the proprietorship to other people, and the land grabbing is happening in front of Salva. And these are his commanders. Did you hear any day in Fizul that has been taken to court? Madam Kalam Al-Karl Berger is arguing in so many different accounts. Innu Salva was right to protect the Dinkas, if indeed there was a plan of Nuer killing the Dinka. Okay? Of course, in 1991, so many Dinkas were victims. That is a fact. We are not denying that. But is it Kir's job to stand with a certain tribe and not stand with the rest? Because he could have simply asked the people who took Madiland. He could have asked of the people who took Bareland. He could have taken Kalikos. He could have investigated the people's land that was taken. Okay. Now, who executed this? Simply, it is the regular forces. Okay. Now I am concluding. I hope I am heard, Yahwana. It is telling me poor connection. Okay, tamam. Now, let me ask a simple question. In what point of view did Carol Berger write his painting? This is the first question. Carol Berger wrote in first person singular and mainly third person omniscient and third person objective. This means in literature that she was an observer and she saw some of these things being done in her presence, and that some of these things were told to her by those who either killed people or those that were dismembered or those whose land was confiscated. That is question number one. What does that mean simply? It's called, in scholarly writing and in scientific criteria, Carol Berger wrote her book with a lot of scientific argumentation. And actually, if I were to be a doctor, remember that please, I'm not a doctor. If I were to be a doctor, I would give her 75%, and that is B+. And I'm very honest on this. Because this is being built on the reality of what the sciences is saying, unless you give me your argument otherwise, which I am awaiting to learn. That is question number one. Number two, did she use any piece? Did she say any piece of information that is incorrect, that the mind cannot believe? So, okay, one of the moderators reminded me that 75 is a C+. Thank you for that. But it is dependent from a university to the other. It's okay anyhow. But that is lovely to be reminded. The main important question here is, did she use any piece of information that can be proved wrong? That can be proved wrong? Indeed, most of the things that she said are scientifically vindicated and evidence, except that she sometimes uses the term Dinka to mean the estate and to mean the elite. Please, that's really very important, because this is scientific honesty, which she should have made clear on those bases. But she was very honest to that regard, because she saw the dynamic, a very close dynamics between Jin as a community in some accounts and Dinka elites who made the policies to that regard. Please listen very carefully to this. And actually, in literature, we call it diction, the choice of words. But I will speak about it later on when I come to the last point. And so this is to say that most of the statements she uttered are scientifically very correct. Very correct. And that she doesn't have any ulterior motives. Otherwise, you will have to prove. Or she did not even politicize, because as a scholarly writing, you have to give your own analysis. You have to give philosophical insight, but it has to be based on certain accounts. That's where it makes a difference. And so we cannot in any way or close regard her as an agent of neo-colonial forces. When we give a critique of the book, you just talk of the critique of the book. Like now, I'm just speaking as somebody who has a hat of somebody who studied the literature by career and linguistics. That is a hat. But I am not putting my political things being a member in the National Salvation Front. I'm not doing that. Otherwise, I would give my opinion. Or otherwise, I could have sided with my people and not even say that the Nuer people killed the Dinkas because I am a Nuer. Why would I say that? But this is scientific sincerity. That is really very important. So my only observation is on the issue of whether, to her, is Dinka community synonymous to the government of South Sudan, according to her, is something that she should have at least elaborated on. Just that is the observation that I can make. But I will say something little about it in my own analysis as to why did she choose that. Now, let me speak about the critics of her painting, because I have gone through some of the critics, those who responded to Carol Berger, some scholars. So let us see also their opinions, and then we conclude. Now, in response to Dr. Carol Berger, some individuals from the Jiang community and a handful UK-based academicians reacted heatedly. And they acted heatedly actually in a tweet made by Dr. Madud, who ridiculed Carol Berger in a statement. And then so many people actually from Jing community responded with the same heat. But on the other hand, I have also found another handful group, and I'm saying handful because the number is just like 5 people. Not more than that. That's why I'm saying a handful, according to the literature. Okay. Now, who are these? These are Nikki Candasley, and this is of Pembroke College in England and of University of Cambridge. This is Naomi Pendle of the London School of Economics. These are Zoe Comerick of the University of Oxford. And these are Diana Felix da Costa, the School of Oriental and African Studies. These are the handful of people who made their observations. Now, this is what they said. They said this, I quote, "We are writing in response to the circulation of Dr. Carol Berger's working paper, Ethnocide as a Tool of State Building, South Sudan and the Never-Ending War. The paper presents an incendiary argument about ambitions of dominance by the Dinka. This they have said as the scholars, as they were giving their comments. To that regard, these scholars, and assumes is an empirical fact. Now they are talking about Carol Berger, that Carol Berger is assuming that she did her work empirically. This means that they are doubting. She justifies this with complex but unanalyzed evidence, selectively presented much of which is anecdotal. Anecdotal in literature means a storytelling, and in many cases, factually inaccurate. There are much more complex histories and political economies behind the current crisis, South Sudan. I unquote. This is what they have said. Before I say anything, this is what they have said. Now, they further continued, we are not defending the current government or indeed any of the politicians and military leaders responsible for real ethnic violence and abusive governance in South Sudan, but presenting a handful of elite voices, many of whose short statements are taken fully at face value as representative of the terrain of political thought in South Sudan. And in the process, tearing all of the diverse Dinka community with a genocidal ethnic politics is extremely inflammatory in tense current circumstances. That's what they say. Okay. Now, this is the handful group of some of the UK-based academicians. Now, let me just analyze their statements. First of all, in their statement, the academicians submit that Carroll's painting is a fire-starting and provocative argument because it undertakes ambitions of Dinka dominance, annals of proofs. That is number one. That is number one observation in what they said. That's why they have used the word incendiary. That means it is fire gassing. It is gaslighting, I mean, and it is fire starting. Because it is giving a provocative arguments of accounts. And they have said it with an old mouth. They have said most of which is anecdotal. And in fact, in ethnography, you give anecdotes. Anecdotes are real accounts or fictional accounts. If it is a non-fictional literature, you give anecdotes of the reality of what the people said, or what is wrong about it, and how do the UK-based academicians see it that it is not very true. Number two, all of these academicians are not by close or by far related to the studies of anthropology, number one, and have got very limited idea about ethnography, number two. Number three, none of them is a literati. None of them studied literature to judge whether this book is qualified for scientific texting or scholarly writing. This is really very important. These are personal observations that I would like to make first. They also suggest that her work may not be empirical, as it is featured of analytical evidence. Now, my question would be that my dear UK academicians have not referred. They spoke generally. It is not allowed in science to just generalize and not give an example. I would have respected them had they given any example. Which of the evidence that Carol Berger gave and she did not give analysis to? Since they have not provided us with any example in their writing, I remain quiet, and so scientifically, I cannot take with their critique. And factually inaccurate arguments. They have said that Carol Berger suggested inaccurate arguments. That remains a claim. As a literati, I would ask, what is your evidence? The UK-based academicians could have referred us to like this and this, like this and this are inaccurate. Have they given any example of the inaccuracy of what Dr. Carroll gave? Unfortunately, they just gave a generalized information, which actually tells me that this handful group must have been in contact with some individuals. But I don't want to go further into that because I want to remain as a literati. I don't want to get into that. Now, such statements are merely utterance void of scientific inference because they are just claims. If you say Carl Berger is inaccurate, in what? Can you tell me in what, so that I am able to judge? Very unfortunately, the fellow academicians have not presented any scientific argument which gives forth reasons as to why they think Carl Berger's painting is not empirical or incendiary. Neither have they pointed out areas they feel are factually inaccurate or anecdotal. How I wish they mentioned or refer to any dependency sources that support their utterance. Very unfortunately, they didn't do anything, and so I cannot take with their critique. Now, by definition, empirical research, what does it mean, empirical research? Because that's what these scientists mentioned. Empirical research simply means donates an investigation that draws its evidence and conclusions strictly from concretely supportable evidence, as the etymology thereof implies in Greek. Now, word empirical actually implies empirikotos. And do you know what is empirikotos? Empirikotos means experience, something that you must have experienced. And that's what ethnography is all about. Now, empirical evidences takes after observation, induction, deduction, testing, and evaluation as an instrumental lens. And that's what Carroll just did by using, first of all, calibrated, not just calibrated, standardized scientific instruments of ethnography. That's what she exactly did, unless we are joking. Now, at the onset of Carroll's painting, it is evident that she deployed a longitudinal style. Now, a longitudinal style in research is not just cross-sectional. It is longitudinal in a sense that it studies phenomena and connected accounts so that she is able to give correct analysis. And that she does. She picks that style to embellish her work relatively. But as I mentioned earlier also, she dwelt on descriptive qualitative research approach, implying that she intended to gather non-numerical data because she was talking about themes of remapping and change of democracies. And of course, in literature, even in research, you cannot give analysis of non-numerical data using non-numerical approaches. Because here, the non-numerical data, such as meanings, such as opinions, such as underlying reasons from the subjects of the study or the funds or the partakers. Now, this is very scientific, that are often structured or semi-structured in form through interviews. Now, the sample size for such is frequently small, thus deploying a conversational type method. And that's what she did, because she cannot interview everybody, but she has to take some good samples. And that's what we have in scientific research. There is no such a thing that you would go and study a whole Nilotic group. You have to take a sample size. And the scientific approaches avail that. Now, in my humble opinion, these reactions are more of lobby statements. These statements of dear UK-based academicians are just lobby statements. And when I say lobby statements, I mean, and I'm serious about it, that these folks, and actually it appears in the statement they made, because they said this does not agree with suggestions of some South Sudanese elites. How did they know the opinions of South Sudanese elites? That means they have been interacting with some elites. And so to me, it is very clear that these UK-based scholars are more of lobby guys. Indeed, ironical or tongue-in-cheek to their call, what we call tongue-in-cheek in literature. And that's really very ironical. It does not depict the degrees, the academic degrees they have studied. Somebody in economics would want to nullify what Carol Berger wrote. Imagine, is this not a funny joke? Huh? Is this not a funny joke? Did she speak about any economic things? Somebody who's just doing Oriental studies, the religions like Shintoism, like Buddhism, like Christianity, like Islam, would come also and want to say something about what Carol Berger wrote. Is this not a funny joke? Huh? That's why I said these are just lobbied statements. And I'm saying this because they fail to point out the suit flaws, because they have spoken that Carol Berger's book has got flaws and has got imperfections. Where are they? Where are they? Have you mentioned them? And since you have not mentioned them, that is just a generalized statement. Now, this is also sense, and I have sensed it. This is also detected between the lines in their rejoinder, and I quote, Dr. Berger, a white woman. By the way, this is what they said. Dr. Berger, a white woman, claims both academic and intellectual authority, as well as ethnographic legitimacy. Global North researchers, particularly white scholars, must work to the highest ethical and methodological standards in fragile, high-tension situations, especially as our work has the potential to increase risks of harm for South Sudanese colleagues and residents. We are strongly aware that within the global North humanitarian regime, our work is imputed with more expertise and insight that is generally warranted. شفتوا يا اخوانا كشفوا نفسهم كيف؟ يعني قال Carol Berger, a white woman. What need is there for you to mention girl, a white woman? And that she claims to be both academic and intellectual authority. Is Carol Berger claiming? Carol Berger is a scholar from Oxford University. Is she claiming? Kadashu. They are even attacking her. Innu she is claiming. Huh? Is she claiming? This is somebody that has been credentialized and awarded a doctoral degree from the second highest and prestigious university in the world, and that's Oxford University, and the first in the whole Europe. Is this not a funny joke? And they are saying that she is claiming ethnographic legitimacy. Claiming? She has been to South Sudan for all this long, and you think she's claiming? This shows you that the guys were very biased. Now, and they went on by saying that global North researchers, you see, this is now politics of global North and global South, the developed, the underdeveloped. What brings it here to call us Berger's work? You see, but they have said it very clearly. Must work to the highest ethical and methodological standards in fragile, high-tension situations, which I agree with them in one hand, especially as our work has the potential to increase risks of harm for South Sudanese colleagues and residents. South Sudanese colleagues and residents. South Sudanese colleagues and residents. This means that they have been informed by some South Sudanese colleagues. Who are they? Think about it. But for me, I know. We are strongly aware that within the global North humanitarian regime, our work is imputed with more expertise and insight that is generally unwarranted. This is just a funny joke, and I unquote. Now, I ask the questions. Does Berger claim to be, or is indeed a renowned credentialed scholar? Is she claiming intellectual authority, knowing that Dr. Berger is endowed with her academic credentials from Oxford University? The last time I checked, Dr. Berger holds a doctorate in anthropology from the University of Oxford. The last time I checked. Now, another critique, and that is really very important to me, is Professor Madud, this South Sudanese professor. And he's an anthropologist. And so I also picked his critique because he is somebody who can logically criticize Berger First of all, being senior to Berger, because Professor Madood is senior to Berger. He got his doctoral degree and taught many times before Berger. At least I was very keen enough to listen to the man, and especially that he has been endowed professorship. And so I went through what he wrote. But Professor Madood, the then government enthusiast, the former minister who hails from Jin community, has also registered disagreement with Berger's work in a tweet he made on March 31st, 2019. So in his tweet, he made this critique. Dr. Berger, a Canadian former, Dr. Berger, comma, please let me start from the very beginning. I quote, Dr. Carol Berger, comma, a Canadian former journalist. Wanebe in American English means who wants to be. Wanebe anthropologist of South Sudan has produced some garbage she called ethnocide as tool for state building. Nothing more than hate speech against the Dinka. I am writing to see who publishes this as an academic paper. Damn. And he doubled exclamation mark. I untweet, I unquote what the man said. That is the only thing our professor wrote. Yahona. That's what our professor wrote. Now let me comment. Indeed, I decline to comment on Professor Madood's tweet, as it is just a hyperbole of unfounded countenance. You see, in literature, we have something we call hyperbole, or some people would love to call it hyperbole. It is indeed hyperbole. And hyperbole is a literary device that means exaggeration. In simple language, it means exaggeration, or it means overstatement. Now, I decline to actually comment to what he wrote scientifically. Simply, you know what? Because it is just an exaggeration. He just said Carol Berger produced just garbage. That what she wrote is just garbage. The professor يقول كلام زي ده. And it's just hate speech. And he untweeted against the Dinka. And that he is awaiting who publishes this. This is to suggest in another way that he doubted the publishers of Carol Berger's work. This is a call just to be silent or to respond to his scholarly way to Berger if I were Madood. If I were Professor Madood, I would just keep quiet or respond to Berger scholarly, especially that I have scientific tools in my hand as a professor, rather than regarding her painting as some garbage. Now, Professor Madood, you can continue saying that, but you will find it very difficult to convince some of us, because you are not the only educated South Sudanese, neither you are the only educated African in the world. That we will not accept. And so Madood ridicules and mocks her academic credentials as a wannabe anthropologist. Is she a wannabe anthropologist? Wannabe anthropologist, or she is indeed an anthropologist? But of course, I cease to say anything. Now, in conclusion, I believe that Dr. Berger was cognizant that her painting would inform a hot debate while she was making her final report. I'm sure about that. I'm also convinced that her work was never by far or near biased or prejudiced. Somebody who says her work is biased or prejudiced, you can say that. But please, how is it biased and prejudiced scientifically, not just statements, scientifically, by the given scientific criteria, by the given scientific basis of saying that this work is biased or this work is gave a prejudice of something? To me, indeed, her work is very ethical and highly empirical. And by the way, I'm saying this from an authority. I'm not just saying this circuit. I'm saying this from authority of academic opinion. Being a linguist and a literati. Not just khiyal, yani. Ma khiyal. Now, classes of scholarly expressions provide that orthography as a method increases the internal validity of a painting. Now, for you to prove something, you have to give what we call internal validity, and you have to give what we call external validity. Interestingly, Dr. Berger accedes and yields to internal and external validity conventions and classics, like the point of view, like the methodology, the way she collected her data, the way she gave scientific analysis. These are all known conventions and classics of external and internal validity. Except, in my opinion, the only defect, in my opinion, she should have heeded is the choice of words. And that's what I have said earlier. The only thing that I feel that Dr. Berger should have made at least some justice into is the choice of some of the words, uses Jing as a synonym to the elites and using Jing as a synonym to the state policies. However, Dr. Berger, like any researcher, should not be forced to use political words. That is also another view. Do you know why? Because she was just a scientific researcher. She knows that those who claimed Anadyar and Makal and Bileb are purely Jim, supported by the state. Is that a lie? Dama Jim? And Shalo Arab bita Anadyar, that's just one example. And Shalo Nyamlel Dama Jim community? And Shalo Arab bita Dama Jim community? Ma'anihna, we cannot lie, Akhwana. And that's where she got confused. But she is not a politician, and we cannot blame her to choose some words. She has to say them as naked as they are, in my opinion. Otherwise, she will have to justify what she went through. Now, I have so many comments on what Ustaz Dendi gave, very serious comments. But since this is not a debate, I want to keep quiet until here, and I would make some useful interjections, and then I will connect to some of his comments so that our argument is reachful. In conclusion, Carol Berger's book is such a standardized book, highly calibrated, and if you want to nullify it, you will have to just argue based on the available scientific criteria. Thank you so very much. May God bless for all of you.
شكرا كثير، شكرا استاذ حسين على مداخلتك. فنحن حنفتح الفرص، لكن قبل ما نفتح الفرص طبعا للمداخلات الاسئله ندي نرجع المايك لاستاذ حسين العيوب، هو يعمل يدي برضه لمحه عن النقطه اللي كان بيتكلم عنه اساسيا. من ثم هنفتح فرص المناقشه والحوار الجماعي، وهناخذ 4 فرص اول، بعد ذاك ننزل وثاني نحاول.
Hello.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Brother Madid.
Hey, how you doing, brother? Okay. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, welcome. My microphones.
Okay. Okay, brother. Abiel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, welcome. So you hear the argument, the debate on the both sides. So two gentlemen, Yengi Dayok and General Ayan Theo. So they put their opinion in. So both sides. So I want to highlight a little bit because how two of them they speak will analyze. And for those of you watching, please join if you can. Two guys talk, and also I want to let everybody know that these two gentlemen, they are opposition, they are opposing government, but you guys hear their viewpoint about the book of Carl Baker. So you hear about the way that Dendit spoke.
I just came when Ian Matthew was speaking. I did not hear what Dendit have said.
Yeah.
And I did not hear his side of analysis, but I hear mostly General Ian Matthew when he was speaking, but that's why.
Let me give you a highlight and the rest.
Okay.
So Dendit spoke first. He gave his opinion, the way that he saw the book. He criticized the government, the JCE, and Carl Baker. So he didn't take a side. He talked the way that he saw the book, how the Dr. Baker written the book. So he said that you should not put three together like the government, JCE, and the Dinka as a tribe or as a community. So that's where he disagree with Dr. Carl Baker on that, to generalize the Dinka, the Jiang tribe connected with the government and with the JCE. So he take an independent position. That's what he did. And you see, Ayan Matthew he took a side. He support what what Dr. Caro said. He support 100%. He didn't criticize it, but he's supporting. He agree everything that has been written in the book or in the article. So, and also too, for those of you, this is a very interesting. I see this is a very interesting debate. Two guys are opposition. They oppose the government. Two guys, they are a different ethnic background. Dendit is from Dinka, and Ayan Matthew is from Nuer. And you see how the way that the tribe play a role here. So, but one of the Dinka guy, which is Dendit, he didn't take a side with the JC, for example, or with the government, but he condemned JCE, he condemned the government, he condemned Dr. Carl Baker. That's what he did. But Ian Matthew, he didn't condemn Dr. Baker article, what he wrote, some of them, he agreed. So that's the brainstorming, what happened. So you can go ahead and respond to Ian Matthew, what he say, you hear it. So you can go ahead and take a floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Madid. I just want to congratulate you on the new platform, the Eagle House. Is it Eagle House? Yeah.
Yeah. South Sudan Eagle Media.
Yeah, South Sudan Eagle House. Thank you for establishing this kind of media. South Sudan is a country that needs to have a multiple media outlet because it's a form of information. And I'm very glad that to be in this platform with you. And also, I want to greet all your viewers, those who are listening as well, on this topic of analyzing Dr. Berger paper. If you can hear me very well, just let me know.
Yes, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. As I said earlier, Brother Madid, I think we spoke about this book a couple of times when it first came to surface with the title of ETHNOCIDE. We are not criticizing Dr. Berger. She has an independent opinion as an academia and also someone that need to learn about the history of people of South Sudan, and that was maybe the purpose of this paper. And she can write what she wants, but what I can criticize her about is when he put the opinion, even her own opinion also regarding what is happening in South Sudan. I can say these were misguided facts, they were not truth. And when Dr. Brother Ian Matthew spoke earlier, I comment because some of the things that I've said are not stated well, they are lies, they are not truth to it, because the creation of 28 state, it said that it was made purposes so that the GM as a community can have a monopoly of decision in South Sudan in the number of the state. And he talked mostly about the land that was taken from other communities. Even I'm surprised to learn from Ian that there was a land of Nuer that was actually annexed to the eastern bank of the Nile. The fact that it's not there, we know our borders very well, and Ian did not specify which land is that. He said Longachuk, but based on the degree that established the 28 state, it was established based on the counties, and there was no counties of Eastern Nuer, Eastern Nuer of Jikin that was actually annexed to the eastern bank of the state, and that's when I said it's lying about what he was trying to say. But the bottom line is this: as you continue to analyze this book, most of the facts will continue to come out, because generalizing the community as the people that has decision making and not talking about the government, it was misguided. And the purpose of the book came to be known that if something happened in South Sudan, I think those of Dr. Carlos will bear responsibility of anything that may happen to the community of Dinka, because it's been targeted in this book. And that's the reason why I respond earlier. We need to talk the truth. The truth is the fact that even in this book, I have this paper, the paper that is published. And what surprised me, Brad Madid, when other non-Dinka spoke being interviewed, Dr. Carlos did not mention their name or where they come from. They may say that maybe a person in Unumis, a person in Malakal or in Wau, but she always afraid of telling the people of South Sudan who is that individual was. But when it is an Dinka individual that is speaking out, he will state the name clearly, that this is the person that's speaking, and this is the quote from so and so, and it's from the Dinka community. And to be sincerely, you better be truthful to your readers as well, so that we can know the sources of your information instead of focusing only on one ethnic community. Let us continue to analyze the book, but I have taken my opinion earlier that the book is not was biased against ethnic community of Dinka as a whole, and it's something that really clear. Even the famous code of the SPLA, when Dr. Jordan said that we need to take the town to the people, Dr. Carlos also has an opinion on that code, that it was actually a code by the Dinka to invade other people's land. And for people like Ian Matthew, the member of the SPLM, not to question such kind of opinion, I think it said a lot about the political, and the political opinion against the community of Jiang as well. Because Jiang is, as I said earlier, is a member of the SPLM. He was a spokesperson of SPLM. He understood the SPLM policy very well, and she could have asked Dr. Carlo, how did you say that taking time to the people that was made by Dr. John Garang was the meant to provide services to the people of South Sudan, and that was the reason why. But when you come and mention in this book, in this paper, that is actually is a code by the is a code by the Dinka. I mean, is a quotation by the Dinka so that the Dinka can invade the people land. I was very, very surprised not to. I don't know what they said about it, but what they have read the book thoroughly well, the paper. I don't know about this, but any members of Manjang, wherever you are, whether you're academic or if you read this paper, you will actually question this paper, because the way that the Carlos said it will actually inflame the situation that we had in South Sudan. It seemed that as a Dinka that has the Dinka has an agenda, that was there. It's not the Dinka, actually the government, and he's trying to say that is the Dinka who is the government, when the fact the government is the government of SPLM, and the government carrying the government of national unity. Even when the book was established, there was also the government of the peace has already been signed by that time, I believe, and the government that we had by that, it was not the government of the Dinka, and that is misguiding to the people of South Sudan and to the people and that actually the friend to people of South Sudan, that the SPLM-led government has to be seen as the SPLM-led government, not the government of the Dinka. In response even to the paper, Brother Madid, I think there are few professors that actually question the colors. I think maybe Ian Matthew will talk about them. And most of these are their colleagues in some of the universities. They question that this paper was not thoroughly thought out, because the ambiguous of the dominant by the Dinka, and assume this is an imperial fact. She justified this with a complex but analyzed evidence. You see, she said that this was written by one of the professor called Nick, I think, and he said that she analyzed evidence, selectively presented, much of which is in many cases factual inaccurate. That means most of the facts that are not in the places. We would have loved the color to come out actually, so that a person like myself that was born in Malakal, I know Malakal that is not a land of Shalom. When he said that the town of Malakal was destroyed, which is the homeland of Shilluk, I have a question for her. Where did he get that fact from, that the land of Malakal is actually for Shilluk? And this is also one of the things that continue to be questioned to the people there of this land, because we understood the boundaries that we have between the Chola and the Dinka of Padang is the Nile, and that fact will not change. And here it was misguided. It was not the truth about it. And Dr. Brother Yin also said the same thing, that the people, the town like Anagdiar and Malakal are the land of the Shilluk, which is not that case. Even though he may have grown up in Malakal and went to school in Malakal, the Yin does not know the historical facts. And one time I asked him, can he explain to me the meaning of Anagdiar in Shilluk? And Dr. Yin said yes, but up to now he was not able to come forward and explain this, define the word Anagdiar, to know that the land belonged to the people that he claimed it was belonged to them. This is what I can say about his fact. He also failed to mention that, mostly focus about the Dinka grabbing the land, while the Koba, as we speak, Koba actually the indigenous land of Banyuak, and Yin Matthew did not mention this. Even Dr. Carlos did not mention this in his book, in her book. In that case, if we want to talk about which people actually occupied other people's land, and think this truth also can be said to the people of South Sudan and to the people of Anuak, to know that the Akobas belong to them historically. So this is what I just want to say, and we can continue to listen to analysis. But my opinion has already been, I've already said several times that this book is biased, and I believe many of us have said the same thing who have read the book, because the objective of the book continue to be seen by the people of South Sudan, and now it's being used as a tool to actually mobilize other ethnic communities that the Dinka has an agenda to occupy other people's land. They're connecting the issue of the people in this central Equatoria, for example, and they are connecting it to the people of the Shilluk in Malakal, when the truth is that these two things are totally different. The reason people normally went there, we all understood that most of them went there when people were during the liberation, and some of them went there recently as a result of flood, and also the issue of Malakal. These people were living there before, the fact that we are not claiming the Malakal that belong to us, and it was not the focus of the issue of the current war that's happening in South Sudan.
Okay, thank you, Brother Biel. Thank you. So this is the very interesting. The reason why I will not be doing this to a lot because I have a little bit cold.
Let me say one thing he said here in the book. He said on the eastern border with I'm quoting what Dr. Carlo actually wrote. He said that on the eastern border with Ethiopia, the destroyed town of Malakal, the traditional homeland of Shala people, is now occupied by the predominantly young men from Rek and Agar section of Dinka from the interior, the former state of Warab and Lake State. When I visited in April 2018, I was assured that it was safe to walk to the east center of Malakal, where the market has been reduced to no more than one street of shop and seller. I quickly realized that the men, whether seated under the tree of loitering near the shop, were Dinka speakers from Lagos State. The shopkeepers, meanwhile, were predominantly northern Sudanese, including the Darfurian, the longtime ally of Kir government. There are reports that the plane loaded with the young Dinka men have been landing in Malakal since late 20. You see, this is actually not true.
Yeah.
In Malakal, people that were living there, Brother Madid, were the people of South Sudan Army, South Sudan Defense Forces. And understanding the complexity of the war that we had, mostly they are from I think, Sector 2. Sector 2 was all sector of the SPLA that was commanded by the SPLA forces. And most of these young men that he found in the town, they are not even the resident in Malakal, but they are the soldiers. Were brought there because Malakal was a hostile city. We know that the history of Malakal being taken back and forth. And he himself said that, she said that this is the people being taken from Warab State. This is totally misguided truth. And people have to question her motive of this, because there's no other Dinka that were brought from Barakazal to come and live in Malakal as resident, And why could you only bring men, not the families, if you want to actually bring people to live in Malakal? This is not the truth, and I'm very surprised that Dr. Carlos, she actually meant what she want to mean. She want to see Dingas as the aggressor. She want to see them as people that are actually responsible for what's happening in South Sudan, when the fact is not that case.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. And this is when David Ayok mentioned something very important on his closing remark. He said that this book or this article is very dangerous. The reason why behind it, Dr. Carol wrote this like that, is because she won what happened in Rwanda to happen in South Sudan. And also, he also mentioned that what happened in Germany a long time ago, he won that to happen in South Sudan. And this is what happened also in Darfur. Exactly, that's what she won to happen in South Sudan. So, Dr. Dengi just mentioned those 3 or 4 quotes, which are very true, of course, and South Sudanese people should not condone kind of article that the dividing us bring the chaos and war in the country and division. But it looks like some of the South Sudanese, they are using it. And something surprised me, Brother Biel Kon, is because, and the rest of you are watching, is because this article was written in back 2018 or 2015, 2018, I believe. And I don't know why. What is the reason behind of these people, mostly opposition, bringing this article right now and they speak about it, while the country sees they are talking about peace, and election is coming up in 2023. So Either they want chaos and war continuing in South Sudan. They don't want stability in the country. They don't want a suffering of citizens to end in the country. What they want really, because somebody who's supporting this kind of article or the books is a person who's citing the violence. And this is all Genovian South Sudanese have to condemn it. And for those individuals using this book, they have to be condemned. Because this thing is bringing a division among South Sudanese. It's not a good thing to single one tribe out and label it, while the government is belong to all people, not belong to Dinka tribe. And this is my argument to all to those positions that who are using the article. I always arguing with them that you need to differentiate the government and the Dinka and the Jiang as a tribe. So, but they are not using them, they're using a tribal way for their political gain, but which is not the one. I just want to encourage all South Sudanese to distance themselves away from this kind of people, condemn them, don't condone those kind of rhetoric. This can bring not a thing that can bring the division among our people. So what we should say right now for those people, we should be talking about the peace and the stability. This is what we want to say. But our people is still going on forward. So that's my remark by posting that. I will not be continuing to do this show, Brother Biel. If you have time, you can go back to the clubhouse. We can listening in. So I'm going to end this show. I am a little bit cold, so I will not be speaking a lot. So for those of you who have access to clubhouse, you can go on, log to your clubhouse, and you can see people. It will be a huge, about more over 170 or 180 are listening into that conversation because it's a huge. So that's the reason why I bring it in, and let the people who don't have access to clubhouse listen to what they do. Because these two people, Dengdi Dayok and Yan Matthew, they are the two main speakers. Mm-hmm. And also, there are two main speakers. They are the one who lies in the book. And also to let you guys know that these two people are opposition. And also, I just want to mention that to let you guys know, as two of them, they have different point of view about the book or about the article, because one is an independent thinker and one is a division thinker. So that's what happened. And you guys can be the judge. You need to judge three things. Judge Dr. Berger book article. You can analyze in the talk of Musa Dengi Dayo, and you can analyze the talk General Ian Matthew. So those are the three things you guys can listen in very careful and draw the line. What do you think? So thank you, Brother Biel. I will yell the microphone back to you. And you put your last statement before I close the show. Thank you.
Brother Madid, thank you for bringing this. I think that is a good thing, because we have people back even in villages of South Sudan that may have access to your media house, and they may not have access to Clubhouse. And it's good that you brought this issue to them so that they can also listen. Yes, as you said, we will be able to listen carefully and judge both the book. For those who have not read it, you can judge it based on the analysis of these two gentlemen, what they have said on their perspective, opinion, and also you can come to your own conclusion, understanding, to be able to pass your own judgment as well. Because it's good that you read the paper, you analyze the way these gentlemen are speaking, and given the position as people that actually are opposing this current government of national unity, and the position in the opposition, I think it's good that we understood that it's not these people that are not coming from they're not supporting the government or the current peace agreement. But most important thing is the polarization of what the book have caused the people of South Sudan, especially here in social media. We have seen that some people are calling us the Bible need to be taught to the people of South Sudan. that there's an agenda on it that has been unheard by Dr. Carlos when he did not even speak to the overall the Jing in the villages. He may have spoken to few elders, that are elders of Jing community or South Sudanese in this case, but he did not even go and speak and understood the opinion of other people, because there are so many people that actually does not like what is happening in South Sudan, and Jings are always a victim of what is going on in our countries. And when some individuals come here and pass judgment that the Jing has an agenda to control South Sudan, the Jing has an agenda to occupy other people's land, when you connect what is happening in Central Equatoria and bring the issue of people in POC, once we were all there in POC, it could have been good that if Dr. Carlos came earlier in 2013, 2014, when the war actually broke out, to see the atrocities that was committed by also an armed opposition among the ethnic Dinka community and other people that were not supporting their cause. You could have given her a glimpse about political complexity in South Sudan. But given the fact that when actually things are normalized, when the peace has been there, when people are going back to the town, Dinka are not responsible for people staying in POC. Padang is not responsible for the Chalo or the Chiluk that are coming to live in the POC in Malakal. Did she even go to the Western Bank where most of these Agulek forces were actually occupying? She could have gone there and see whether the Chalo themselves, the ordinary Chiluk, were staying there. Why were they not staying there when the fact that the Agulek were the one occupying this territory? Agulek were the one that in charge of the security, and they were not there. So the issue of people in POC cannot be used as the tool that the Dinka were responsible to take people there. We are not responsible. It was the war that broke out in South Sudan. It was an armed opposition, the power struggling within the SPLM, and Dr. Carlos missed that point, that the people in POC, that the land were chased. The people in Malakal were not living there because the Dinka occupied the land. When that's not the truth. You can live in Malakal, you are resident in Malakal, you have a house in Malakal, come and reside. But do not think that the Dinka that are living there, that were living there before, will leave, whether in Nagdia or Malakal, to go back to where they're going to go back. They are resident of South Sudan, they are resident of Upper Nile State. If they chose to stay there, they will stay there. If those people want to come back, let them come back and start to build the houses. We are not responsible for destroying the houses. These are houses built with the hut. They were not built with the brick that can stay there for 10 years and waiting for them to come. These houses fall because when you leave, no people occupying that places, of course, the houses cannot be in that condition. And also, Agulek themselves, they were responsible of destroying Malakal. In 2015, when Johnson Oleg actually switched sides, he destroyed Malakal totally. So, what I just want to say, the facts in the grounds are different than what Dr. Carlos want to paint here in this paper. And the facts in the ground state that the issue of people in Numili, were they not there? Of course, there was IDP when people were fighting. There were also the families of those soldiers that were fighting along in Central Equatoria and Eastern Equatoria. People were living in, there was no concern about the land being taken or the agenda that the Dinka want to occupy this land. But you try to connect this issue and also the issue of Wow. Well, Dinka were there before. They were living in Wow. They were living in, even they say Warab, I think they say that Durchul or Durbel or other, that the land would be taken from them. Who did it? Who took the land from them? They are still living there. They are still a resident of that places. They are being recognized. No land has been taken from anybody. So this issue of the land, they want to connect what is happening as a war continues in South Sudan, and that's why we are saying, Ajamana, let us accept this peace agreement. Even those of Yen Matthew that continue to not to accept this peace, I think they will once come to the sense and accept this peace agreement, because there's a need for people of Sudan to realize that aggression or war cannot bring a solution to what we have in South Sudan. We need this peace agreement, like what happened today in Khartoum. when there's two parties actually sign. We will also come to analyze this piece because it seemed it's mostly about a bullet, not SLM IO. That was a function of Simon Gadwigwal, but this is not the topic of this discussion. Well, maybe we'll find a time to come and analyze what was signed between the government of South Sudan. But we welcome the peace. We need our people to resume a peaceful life, that the gun should be silent, that we all live in South Sudan as South Sudanese. There is no second or third class citizen. We are all equal in that country. And you're mentally, some of our brothers, they are mentally thinking that they are second or third class citizen, when the fact is that we are all equal. Thank you for giving me the opportunities, and we can go back and listen to what they're saying, and people also can listen to some other people that are coming to say the opinion through this clubhouse. I can listen and
yeah. Thank you. We can go back there and join, listen to those people.
Yes.
Great discussion. Thank you, brother Bilkon. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you on the other side.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you all for watching. Thank you for coming in. Please start like the page. The page is very new. Start liking it. We will be bringing a lot of discussion, unifying topic about South Sudanese bring together. So we will bring more topic like this in this media platform. Keep sharing it, liking it. Thank you. Have a good night. Have a good day. Thank you.